You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Then it perfect in the kid. Got a billion new single, my hater, the big better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million, the devil, that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Enters Hazbin Hotel. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of MaxX69 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. After she left the room, with her normal steps while staying silent, she reached the reception and took the nearest seat right next to the hallway. Once she sat down, she felt like her body had turned off. She could feel her eyelids heavier and her body become more relaxed. She knew she had to stay awake for her son. She tried to do it with all of her remaining, but her body said otherwise. That day was just too much for her. She needed to rest. With the last of her strength, she blinked one more and thought about Izuku's safety, before closing her eyes and falling asleep, tilting her head a little bit forward in the process. "Inko midoriya," someone said in a casual, but at the same time kind tone, tapping Inko's right shoulder gently. Inko was woken up by this gentle touching. She drowsily opened her eyes, letting the light enter her visionary organs. After she opened her eyes, she came to the conclusion that it was now daytime, surprising her in the process. She blinked a few times to fully wake up, then looked around, searching for the one who tapped her. "Inko midoriya," the person repeated. Hearing the voice from her right side, she moved her head to the right and saw Akari, the nurse who had brought the painkillers and the infusions to Izuku. After she set her eyes upon her, Akari opened her mouth once again and proceeded to speak. "I'm sorry for waking you up, madam, but I should inform you that your son's transformation has finished," she reported bonily. "What?" Inko questioned as she widened her eyes in shock and worry. "Where is he now? Is he okay?" "Don't worry, he's fine now. He's in room 12 on the first floor." Akari responded with a small smile on her face. "Can I see him?" Inko asked unsurely. "Of course, just use the elevator. Then turn left and third on the right. You can't miss it." The nurse guided as she pointed at an elevator which was, from Inko's perspective, at the right side of the reception. How did she not notice it earlier? Maybe she didn't see it because of her stressness or her tiredness, but it didn't matter. After seeing the elevator, Inko looked back at Akari and said the following. "Okay, thank you," Inko answered as she bowed to the nurse in gratitude. "No problem. Have a nice day," the nurse said happily as she went away to do something else, probably continuing her shift. With this, Inko turned to her right and walked to the elevator. She pushed the down button at the panel and waited a little, until the doors opened, letting her inside. Once she stepped in, she pressed the up button, making the machine close its doors and take her up to the next floor. With a short, tinkling sound, the doors opened in front of her, allowing her to step out of the cabinet of the elevator and start her way to the room where she was told to go if she wanted to see her son. On her way there, tons of thoughts ran through her head. What are her son's abilities? How he looks now? Will he face discrimination thanks to his appearance? Did Alastor have to do with any of this? Was he the one who made her little boy suffer, or it was just due to his quirk coming to the surface? But the truth was, all of this didn't matter at that moment. All that mattered at that moment was that Izuku was her only child, and she didn't care how he looked like, or what was his quirk, or if that dear demon had to do with any of this. Izuku was still her son, and she will always love her little broccoli head and always help him, no matter what she had to do or how big of a sacrifice she had to do. As she thought over these questions in her head, she arrived in front of the white door which separated her and her son. She grabbed the handle and with a sigh, she pushed it down, opening the door and stepping inside. The room was an ordinary one. Its walls and roof were as white as snow and it had 4 medical beds in it, standing horizontally to the wall where the door was and to the wall at the end of the room. Speaking of which, the wall which was at the end of the room had a huge window on it, allowing the patients to look outside, which was exactly what the only patient and a certain someone inside did, because, to her surprise, the shadow was nowhere to be seen. The only person inside was just the small boy who had a HP who Inko knew since she had brought him into this world. He was Izuku. But his appearance was not the same. Instead of human ears at the side of his head, he had two fluffy, dark green tipped deer ears at the top of his head, pointing upward. Between his ears, two tiny, black-colored antlers were placed, looking similar to a certain demonic dealmaker. As he was sitting on the bed, the blanket only covered his legs, allowing Inko to take a glimpse at his newly formed deer tail. As she looked at him, she was shocked at how much he resembled the demonic entity she made a deal with almost 5 years ago. Maybe Alastor did have some connection to this, but not the way she expected. As she opened the door, hearing the sudden noise, Izuku turned around to see who had entered the room. This let Inko see her son's face, which hadn't changed a bit, aside from the deer ears and antlers at the top of his head. He possessed the same freckles, the same eyes, the same mouth, everything was the same, which calmed her. After seeing his mother, Izuku opened his mouth to speak with his mother for the first time after his transformation. "Mommy?" Izuku quizzed uncertainly as he lowered his new deer ears, nervous for her mother's reaction. "Izuku," Inko called out as she rushed towards her son and embraced him with the biggest hug she could give, making him shoot his ears upwards in surprise. "I was so worried for you. Are you all right?" she asked anxiously. "Yes, Mommy, I'm fine. The doctor helped me a lot," Inko answered happily, calming her mother and smiling at his mother, then flattened his ears once again and formed a sad expression on his face. "Mommy." "Yes, Izuku," Inko asked kindly. "I'm sorry for worrying you yesterday," he expressed sadly. "You don't need to apologize, honey. It wasn't your fault. Besides, I should be the one to apologize to you for not believing to you," Inko confessed, looking down, defeated. "So, I'm sorry." "I'm not mad at you, Mommy," Izuku expressed, with a small smile on his face. "Really?" Inko wondered, surprised by Izuku's answer. "Of course, you're my mommy. I can never be mad at you," Izuku pointed out, his smile growing bigger and wider while straightening his ears. This statement calmed Inko's nerves, allowing her to let out a sigh of relief. "Then it looks like I'm a safe spot for you, Izuku," Inko remarked jokingly. "Absolutely," Izuku answered with a big smile on his face, chuckling with his mother at silliness with a toothy smile, allowing Inko to take a look at his mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. "Izuku," Inko said. "Yes, Mommy?" Izuku asked fondly. "Your teeth," Inko noticed. "Oh, these?" Izuku asked, pointing at his new, sharper-than-ever teeth. "The doctor said that they look like this because of my quirk. He said that it will be strange at first, but I'll get used to it," Izuku explained. "I hope so," Inko expressed, smiling. After she said this, a short quietness was followed, until Izuku lowered his deer ears once again and looked at Inko anxiously. "So, do you still love me?" Izuku wondered nervously. This sudden out-of-the-topic question had taken aback Inko, but she shook it shortly after her son asked this. "Why wouldn't I? Why would you think such a thing?" Inko puzzled, confused by the question. I mean, do you still love me even after I got my quirk and look like this?" Izuku confessed as he looked at the floor in his sadness. Inko's heart sank by hearing these coming out of her son's mouth. How could he think that? He thought that after he's going to look like she's never gonna love him. Oh no, that would never happen, not in a billion years. After his son's question, Inko crouched down to her son's height and looked at her son with caring eyes, touching his face with her right hand in the process. "Izuku, look at me," Inko demanded. Izuku acted just like how he was told to do and placed his eyes on his mother. "It doesn't matter how you look or what your quirk is. I will always support you and I will always love you with all of my heart. Whatever you're going to do, who you will live the rest of your life with isn't matter to me. The only thing that matters is that you feel happy. And if you're happy, I'm happy. That's the most important and that will never change," Inko explained truthfully. "Do you promise?" Izuku questioned with unsureness in his voice. "I promise," Inko swore, ensuring her son. Just as she said this, the door suddenly opened behind her, causing Inko to fully stand up and make both her and Izuku to look at the person who entered. It was the doctor. His appearance didn't change, the only difference was that he had a few papers in his hands, full of results about Izuku's quirk. As he unlocked the door, he noticed Inko in the room, crouching next to Izuku. Seeing the mother of the child inside, he curved a smile on his face. "Ah, Mrs. Midoriya, looks like Akari has already told you to come here," he noted cheerfully. "Why, yes, she did," she confirmed, then developing a concerned look on her face. "Well, Dr. H, how's my son? Were there any problems?" Inko wondered worriedly. "No, there weren't. He had cooperated perfectly," the doctor assured, then looked at papers in his hands, which contained Izuku's examination results. "As you can see, his look is quite different from before. And after his examination, we've found out that that's due to his quirk. His quirk caused him to grow a pair of deer ears and antlers on his head, develop sharp teeth in his mouth, claws on both his fingers and on his toes, and have a tail of a deer." He listed while the Midoriyas listened to him with interest. As he explained these changes in her son's look, it was finally the time for her to drop the question that both she and Izuku was curious about. "So doctor, what's my son's quirk?" Inko asked curiously. "Great question, Miss R. Midoriya, and I'm about to answer it," the doctor responded happily. "I ran some tests and examinations during the night regarding your son's quirk, and I have to say, his quirk is a really unique mutation one. It's called Overlord," he announced. "Overlord?" Inko puzzled, confused by hearing such a strange name for a quirk. "Yes, its name is Overlord. It allows him to summon tentacles from the ground with a maximum amount of 6 with just a flick of his hand. However, the more tentacles he summons, the less he can control them. At this age, he can only move 2 of them with 100% control, but eventually, he'll be capable of controlling more of them. It also allows him to bring people's shadows to life and manipulate them to his bidding, but at the moment, he's only able to control only 2 shadows," the doctor explained. "Oh, my," Inko said in surprise while Izuku was listening to the doctor's words with sparkling eyes, filled with excitement. "Speaking of shadows, he can also teleport within the range of 10 meters with the help of his little shadowy friend," the doctor continued. "Who?" Inko wondered in confusion. "It," the doctor clarified, pointing at Izuku's shadow on the wall. Just as he did this, Izuku's shadow suddenly shifted and revealed itself to be the same small, pitch-black-bodied, jungle green-eyed shadow from the previous day, floating next to Izuku with flattened ears and a defeated look, not daring to look at both of its master and its master mother. "Oh," she gasped in surprise. "With its help, he can teleport to its location if it's in the range I mentioned earlier, but the sudden place changing can cause him some side effects such as dizziness, nausea, and maybe even vomit if he repeats this act a lot in a short amount of time. He can also see through its eyes by it sending mental pictures of its surroundings into his mind, thus offering him to see what it sees. The shadow is also a kind of companion for him, a protector that can fight and protect him," the doctor finished. "Oh my, that's quite a mouthful," Inko remarked. "This is awesome. I can be a hero just like All Might," Izuku beamed with joy, wiggling his deer tail in excitement. "Yes, I think you can be a hero," the doctor confirmed, looking at Izuku with a smile on his face. "Do you hear the shadow? I can become a hero," Izuku bubbled as he looked at his shadowy companion. However, the shadow wasn't as cheerful as it was in the bathroom the previous day. With a face of regret and guilt, it just simply nodded slowly, agreeing with its master. But this change didn't go unnoticed, resulting in Izuku forming a concerned look on his face. "What's the problem, Shadow?" Izuku inquired worriedly. In response, the shadow raised its pitch-black hand and pointed at itself, then at the door of the room, then at Izuku. First, none of them understood what it tried to explain, so it repeated the act 2 times, until Izuku finally understood what it tried to say. "You're saying that you feel bad for leaving me in the bathroom?" Izuku wondered apprehensively, while both Inko and the doctor was taken aback by how fastly he understood what it tried to express. As an answer, it nodded tardily. After that, the shadow pointed at Izuku once again, then shifted the colors of its eyes and outlines to red, extended its antlers and claws, looking like when it browbeat the doctor, with the exception of not having its red mouth, and adapted an angry expression on its face. It also clenched its hands and lifted its arms, imitating the posture of someone who was really angry and was about to proceed at rampage to calm down. Once it did this, the shadow changed back to its original form and pointed at itself again, making Izuku realize another thing. You think that I'm mad at you because of that? Izuku questioned, hitting the nail on the head. Yet again, the shadow nodded with its head, confirming Izuku's guess. You dummy, I'm not angry at you. Izuku replied, catching the shadow off guard with his answer, causing it to look at its master in surprise and tilt its head in confusion, not understanding why he isn't mad at it for letting him down. You're my friend, of course I don't hate you. And I think mommy isn't either, right mommy? Izuku noted, now focusing his attention on Inko. Right, Inko assured, smiling at her son. Hear this? She isn't mad at you, Izuku pointed out, then spread his arms, offering a hug for the shadow. Now, come here. All that regret and remorse the shadow felt vanished in an instant, and the shadow shifted back to its cheerful itself, making a joyful expression on its face with the help of its eyes, straightening its ears and wrapping its body around Izuku's body, hugging him on its own way. Izuku was surprised by this, but he quickly shook it off and chuckled at his shadowy friend's behavior, while Inko and the doctor observed the wholesome moment. Is there any other we need to do, doctor? Inko queried. No, there isn't. You're free to leave, the doctor answered. Thank you very much, doctor, for everything. She thanked him gratefully. My pleasure, the doctor replied. Say goodbye to the doctor, Izuku, Inko requested. Bye, doctor, Izuku said happily. Bye, Izuku, the doctor responded. With this, Inko grabbed her son's right hand with her left hand and helped him down from the hospital bed. Then both of them started to walk towards the door of the room. Once she, Izuku, and the shadow reached it, Inko grabbed the door handle, moved it downwards, and opened the door. And thus, the trio stepped out of the room, closing the door behind them as they left. But unbeknownst to all of including the doctor, their whole conversation was heard by a fifth individual, by a certain deer-based dealmaker demon. In hell, after hearing the full conversation, the radio demon, who was sitting in his armchair, turned his head Oya from the special red old-fashioned radio of his that was next to him on a one-legged table and looked at the fireplace in front of him, observing the flames with his red eyes and his gold-teethed, wide, well-known smile on his face. The time has come, Alastor announced, summoning a piece of paper into his left hand and a 1920s vintage pen into his right, and began to write his letter. For who, you might ask? For his little boy and his deal partner, of course. For 4 years, he was not present in the life of his son. But it's about to change. It's about time for him to finally meet his own little boy for the first time, and vice versa. How will it go? What's going to happen? No one knows. But one thing's for sure. It will change both of their lives forever. Not much time had passed since our little hero, his mother, and his shadowy friend left the hospital. In fact, it was the same day. After the same 10-minute-long trip Inko performed last night, they had finally reached the apartment complex they lived in. Once Inko arrived at the parking lot of the apartment complex, parked with her car, stopped its engine, and unlocked the locks, Izuku, who was still in his pajamas, unbuckled himself, got out of the car as fast as he could, and with his bare feet, he rushed to the stairs and ran up on them to the entrance of his home. All the while the shadow followed him close behind. Izuku, wait! Inko exclaimed as she took the red blanket she used to cover Izuku out of the car and closed the door of the car. Come on, mommy, I want to show our house to my shadow, Izuku shouted excitedly up from the stairs down to his mother with his shadow next to him, then continued his way towards his home. After he did this, Inko just shook her head and smiled at her son's behavior, then closed the doors of her car, placed the car's key into its hole, locked the doors, pulled the key out of the car from the keyhole of the driver's seat door, and proceeded to go up the stairs as well, reaching the door of her apartment, where her little broccoli head and his shadow were waiting for her. Come on, come on, come on, Izuku demanded while jumping up and down in his excitement as Inko put the key into its keyhole in order to unlock it. With a clicking noise let out by the lock, Inko unlocked the door, grabbed its handle, moved it down, and started to open it, allowing Izuku and the shadow to finally enter the apartment. Just as she opened it a little bit, Izuku jolted through the opening, opening the door wide and rushing inside his home in the process, while the shadow was behind him, still following him. Once he was inside, he ran to the middle of the hallway, turned around, and looked at his shadow. Welcome to our home, Shadow. This is the hallway, Izuku announced as he spread his arms wide in a presenting manner. while the shadow observed its master with an interested look on its face as Inko entered the apartment, closed the door, and was about to put the key back into its hole once again to execute its closing fully. After introducing the hallway to his shadowy friend, Izuku went towards the bathroom for the purpose of showing it to his shadow, leaving his mother, who was locking the front door at the moment, in the hallway. As he ran off with his shadow, Inko turned her head, looked at Izuku, rolled her eyes playfully, and formed a sweet, calm smile on her face. Now, she was finally relieved. Relieved because she saw her son was happy with his quirk. Relieved for knowing that he was not angry at her. And most importantly, she was relieved that her son was not in danger anymore. At last, it seemed like everything was going to turn back to normal. But little did she know, that was not the case. After she closed the door, she headed in the direction of her son's room to get some new clothes for him to wear. Once she reached his room, she casually grabbed the handle of the door, pushed it downwards, opened the door, and went inside. Once she was in the room, she went to the wardrobe, opened it, and began to search for clean clothes that Izuku could wear. After a little thinking, she chose an orange shirt, white underwear, and blue trousers. Then, she closed the doors of the wardrobe and exited her son's room. Just as she was about to search for him, a familiar voice called out for her. "Mommy," Izuku exclaimed from the distance, possibly from the living room. "I'm coming," Inko answered, starting her way toward the living room of her home. After she reached the doorway of the room, she peeked inside and saw that her expectations were correct. Izuku was indeed in the living room. More accurately, he was standing on the sofa, which was behind the small desk that still had that old-fashioned radio on it, and was talking to his shadow, mostly about what they can do in the living room. After she witnessed her son in the room, Inko moved her mouth and opened it in order to speak to Izuku. "Yes, honey?" she wondered as she stepped through the doorway and entered the living room. Hearing his mother's voice, Izuku turned around and focused his attention on Inko, while the shadow also set its jungle green eyes upon its master's mother. "Mommy," Izuku beamed joyfully as he got off of the sofa and ran in front of his mother. "Mommy, turn up the computer. I want to show the video to my shadow," Izuku requested cheerfully, hopping in his excitement like a bunny, while his shadowy companion nodded in agreement. Before she spoke up, Inko let out a small sigh. She couldn't understand how he could watch that same over and over again, but she didn't care about it. As long as he was happy, she was happy as well. "All right, I'll let you watch the video," she allowed with a small, sweet smile on her face. "Yay!" Izuku cheered happily, sharing the same emotion with his shadow. "But first, you must dress up," Inko suggested, reminding Izuku of the simple fact that he was still in his pajamas. "Okay," Izuku agreed as he ran back to the sofa and climbed up on it. Once he got up on it, he turned around to face his mother, who put his clothes next to him. After he turned around, with the help of Inko, he took off his light red pajama top, which, with the kind aid of his shadow, he replaced with the orange shirt that his mother chose for him. As our little heroine was about to take off his dark blue and white horizontally striped pajama trousers, he asked his mother and his shadowy friend to cover their eyes, for obvious reasons, which they did without thinking. After he took off his pajama trousers and got the white underwear on himself, Izuku let Inko and his shadow open their visionary organs. Lastly, with the help of his shadow, he put the blue trousers on. After being helped to dress up, Izuku jumped off of the sofa and ran in the direction of his room, where the computer was. "Come on, my shadow, let's watch the video," Izuku bubbled, excited for witnessing his favorite video yet again, despite seeing it a million times. Before following its master, the shadow insisted to grab his pajamas and take them to the bathroom by extending its pitch-black arms towards it. But its action was quickly interrupted by its master's mother. "No, that won't be necessary," Inko refused, holding up her left hand. "I'll do it," she said to the shadow of her son, which nodded in understanding, then followed its master by flying out of the room and after him. Before following them, Inko folded Izuku's pajamas in a fine pile, then walked out of the living room and directed her way towards her son's room. Once she arrived in front of the room's door, which was slightly open, she opened the door more and entered. The sight she saw inside wasn't surprised her one bit. Izuku was already sitting in his chair with his favorite All Might toy figure in his left hand, while he was leaning back and forth in his undeniable excitement. While the shadow, which was at his left side, observed him with curiosity, inquisitive for what triggered its master to be that excited. Inko stepped next to her son, booted on the computer, and began searching for that certain one video while Izuku and his shadow continued the act what they were doing when she entered the room. "Hurry," Izuku told heatedly, leaning back and forth. "Geez, you've probably added 10,000 views just by yourself, Izuku," Inko remarked jokingly as she was still searching for that certain video. "It's so scary for me. I can't watch it," she confessed as she finally found the video and clicked on it, starting it in the process. Once the video started, Izuku stopped his wiggling and looked at the screen with a big smile on his face, while the shadow watched the screen with curiosity. The recording started with a smoky area, then the camera moved to the side, revealing a place of a disaster with a lot of smoke, debris, and fire. There were a lot of people in the place, most of them dirty and injured thanks to the disaster. Screams of fear, desperation, and pain could be heard in the video. The screen moved to the right, showing a grown man with brown hair, a white shirt that had a lot of dust and dirt on it, and bruises on his face. The man turned his head and looked into the camera. "Can you see that? He's already saved 100 people, the man noted, then looked at the scene of the disaster. "That's crazy. It hasn't even been 10 minutes. The man finished. Suddenly, a figure with 6 people on his back and 2 people in both of his hands slowly walked up on a wreck of a bus, causing the crowd and thus the cameraman who was recording to look at their great hero. The figure was a very large man with an equally muscular and well-defined physique. He had chiseled features on his face, a strong jawline, pronounced cheekbones, and bushy eyebrows. He also had short blonde hair, which was swept backwards and possessed 2 distinct tufts that were stuck up above his head, leaning slightly to each side. He was wearing a skin-tight blue bodysuit decorated with a red symbol that resembled a Y of some kind, with a white diamond at its center and a white line connected to it that traced from his chest to his shoulders. The lines were trimmed with the aforementioned red symbol. The symbol seemed to own wings on the side that ran from the top of his torso before ending around his back, over which was a similar red and white design absent of the white diamond. He also obtained large white patches lined with red covered each side of his hips before ending at his lower thighs, and he wore a gold belt that had a silver buckle with red eyes. His forearm sleeves were colored in gold that each had white lines, covered in blue accents over his wrists, and had spiked fins on the sides of his arms. His feet were covered in shin-length gold boots trimmed with white and red accents. Izuku knew exactly who he was since he had seen him when he was 3 years old. He was the #1 hero of Japan, the symbol of peace, and Izuku's favorite hero of all time. He was All Might. As All Might appeared on the screen and let out his well-known happy laugh, without any trace of fear, Izuku's smile became wider and wider, while the shadow looked at the pro-hero in surprise thanks to seeing how strong and muscular he was. "He's laughing," a man remarked as the camera focused on All Might, who was still walking up on the bus and continued his laughter. With one last step, All Might stopped at the top of the bus and looked at the crowd. "It's fine now. Why?" All Might declared as Izuku's smile became bigger, waiting for what All Might was going to say with shining eyes. "Because I am here," All Might announced with his signature line. Like a huge gust of wind, an exhilarating feeling went through Izuku's body and caused him to look at the screen with a joyful smile, while his shadow was as enthusiastic as its master by seeing the video. After the end of the video, Izuku developed a hectic smile and raised his left arm into the air. "He's so cool," Izuku remarked as he looked at the All Might figure in his lifted left hand. "And now that I have my quirk, I can finally be like him too." He celebrated as his shadow congratulated him by clapping its pitch-black hands rapidly in its enjoyment. Inko observed all of this happen with a smile on her face. She was so happy for her son for having such a good time with his quirk. So, to not interrupt the scene, she quietly left the room and slightly closed the door, leaving the two alone in the room. After that, she started to walk back to the living room to grab Izuku's pajamas and bring them into the bathroom where she could put them inside the washing and clean them. When she arrived at the doorway of the living room, she casually stepped in and went for the small pile of pajamas. But she was about to pick them up. She noticed something different about them. Not the pajamas in particular, but what they had on their surface. There was a piece of paper on the top of the tiny pile, and it had a writing on it written by a pen with red-colored ink in it. Who put it there? How could they put it there if she didn't hear anyone move inside the apartment aside from herself, Izuku, and his shadow? And what purpose did they put it there? As she thought this, she decided to take the small paper with her right hand and read the writing, but when she did it, what she read answered 2 questions of hers out of the 3 and shocked her to her very core. My dear Inko, it's been almost 5 years since our wonderful arrangement. As part of our deal, I would like to ask for a little favor, if you don't mind. My dear, would you be so kind to send your little boy down to me? I've been dying to meet him. You can send him by using the radio I had kindly gifted to you all those years ago. Just turn on the radio, rotate both of the side buttons all the way 6 times, tune in to the 6th channel, and push the little button between the 2 other buttons. It's very easy. Oh well, I suppose I won't hold you up any longer. I hope you can bring the little boy of ours to me as fast as you can. Your good friend and partner in crime, Alastor. It was Alastor who sent the letter. But why now? Why all of a sudden after almost 5 years? How did he put the letter there? Why did he want her to send her son down to hell to him right now? Of course, she knew he wanted to meet Izuku, but why did he insist on meeting him? What if he's going to do something with him? What if he's going to hurt her little broccoli head? What if he's going to turn Izuku into some kind of evil dealmaker like him? She couldn't let that happen. But, judging by the writing style of the letter, Alastor didn't want to cause Izuku any harm and just wanted to meet his son. But what if this was just a mask, and he secretly wanted to do something dangerous to him that could possibly make him feel pain? With these worried and desperate thoughts running through her head, she looked at the paper and read the letter again, checking it if she had missed any detail. But she didn't. She read it correctly, without missing anything in it. So, after thinking over and over again what to do, she looked at the radio that was on the table since she had made the deal with, then looked at the sheet of paper in her right hand, and made her decision. Even the mere thought of doing this caused her discomfort and sureness due to her not knowing the best solution. But she thought after Alastor gave her a chance to raise her own child, she owed him at least with this. And if he hurt her sweet baby, she would go down there one way or another and beat the living shit out of Alastor, no matter how strong he was. After making the difficult decision, with a determined and a little bit woeful expression on her face, and the piece of paper in her right hand, she started to walk out of the living room and went back to Izuku's room. When she reached the door of the room, she peeked inside to see what her son and his shadowy friend were doing. They were still watching the same video, probably for the 3rd since she had left them alone. Inko put up a small smile by observing this, but it quickly disappeared, then knocked on the door twice, revealing her presence. Izuku, she called out. Yes, Mommy, Izuku wondered as he turned around in his chair, while his shadow floating next to him did the same. Can you come with me to the living room for a second? Inko requested, trying to hide her worry and stress from her son. Of course, Mommy, Izuku answered joyfully as he got off of the chair, then ran out of his room with his shadow following him behind, not noticing his mother's distress in the process. However, unknowingly to both of them, as the shadow and its master went past her, the shadow did notice the hidden discomfort on her face, making it suspicious for what was the reason for its master's mother to ask its master to stop his fun time and go out of the room. Once they left the room, Inko followed them closely into the living room, where Izuku climbed up on the sofa and sat down on it, with his shadow staying next to him on his left side. After sitting down, Izuku looked at his mother with excited and curious eyes, while his shadow became a little bit suspicious. What are we going to do, Mommy? Are we going to watch TV? Izuku questioned with curiosity in his voice. Izuku. Inko started seriously. Yes, Mommy, Izuku asked cheerfully, his smile never disappearing. Did you ever wonder why your father isn't around? Inko asked nervously. Izuku placed his right index finger on his chin, looked up to the ceiling, and thought for a short amount of time, then let his index finger down from his chin and focused his attention on his mother. No, Mommy, you always said Daddy is somewhere far away and he can't see us, Izuku replied with his answer, which, to be honest, was true at some level. After his answer, he noticed his mother's worry and stress on her serious face. Mommy? What's wrong? Well, she started, gulping a little bit of her saliva down on her throat. He wants to see you, she finished. Really? Izuku exclaimed as all the worry vanished, and judging by the sound of his voice, it was replaced with utter excitement, while his shadow's eyes widened in surprise. Yes, but you have to be careful with him, Inko advised. Why, Mommy? Izuku wondered as he raised his right eyebrow in confusion, tilted his to the left, and lowered his left ear. Because he's unpredictable. You don't know what he's thinking because you can't read it from his face, Inko answered, then crouched down to her son's height. Izuku. She started once again. He wants to meet you, but I don't. What's the reason behind it? He's very mysterious and he's not what he seems to be. He may be very friendly, but behind that mask, he can be very dangerous because you don't know what's going on inside. He's a spirit full of mystery, Inko explained, referring back to the time Alastor slowly manipulated her to make a deal with him nearly 5 years ago, which, in secret, she didn't regret. After her explanation, with an anxious and concerned look on her face, she outstretched both of her arms, placed her hands on Izuku's shoulder, and asked her son seriously, Izuku, are you sure you want to meet him? Izuku was taken aback with worry and a little amount of fear by his mother's words. What kind of man his father was? What did he do that made him so mysterious? Did he really want to meet his father? Judging by his mother's words, the best choice was not to do this. But his curiosity about meeting his father for the first time was stronger than any other emotion inside him. So, with an expression of determination, he fixated his eyes on his mother and opened his mouth to speak. Yes, I want to meet him, Izuku responded confidently, although with a little bit of misgiving in his voice. With his answer revealed, Inko's eyes were shot wide in surprise, but it quickly faded away, and she let out a defeated sigh in response. She turned around to face the red old-fashioned vintage radio on the table and grabbed it with both of her hands. Once it was in her hands, she turned on the radio, allowing it to shine with a yellow light from its loudspeaker. She touched the button on its right side with her right fingers and turned the button fully 6 times, then did the same with the button on the left side, making it let out some interference sound, and tuning it to the 6th channel in the process, just as Alastor instructed her in his little message. While doing all of this, Izuku, alongside his shadow, observed her mother's act with interest and curiosity. During his life, he didn't think much of the radio they had. As his mother told him, they got this radio from his father before he was born, which, yet again, was quite true. But why his mother grabbed the radio so suddenly? Was it due to his father? That's what Izuku was curious about. After tuning in the radio, Inko put it down back to its place on the small table, then stood up and went aside, letting Izuku to get a closer look at it, which he did. While getting down from the sofa, Izuku's shadowy friend faded away from sight, turning itself into Izuku's shadow. After its disappearance, Izuku got off of the sofa and approached the radio with inquisitiveness, then looked at his mother with unsureness in his eyes, doesn't knowing what to do next. Push the button in the middle, Izuku, Inko advised worriedly, not capable of deciding if this was a good idea or not. As his mother guided him, Izuku pushed the middle button, causing it to make a click, as if it activated something. But when he did this, something unexpected happened. As Izuku pushed down the button, a fire erupted from the radio, shining in red and orange colors. It went straight in the direction of Izuku, who flattened his ears, closed his eyes, and crossed his little arms in a defensive formation, trying to defend himself from the incoming flames, while his mother jolted towards him in a chance of saving her son, the flames. Izuku, Inko called out in fear of losing her child by the flames. But it was too late. The flames engulfed our little hero completely. Shortly after, the flames fastly went away, revealing that her son had vanished. Inko moved her head left and right in fear as she tried to find where her son could be, when an idea popped up inside her head, making her possibly realize why Alastor insisted on her using the radio. It was a one-way portal into hell. So, with a concerned look on her face, she glanced at the radio and hoped for one singular thing. She hoped her son was okay. Meanwhile, Izuku was still in the same position, waiting for the flames to burn him. But to his surprise, none of this happened. Instead, when he opened his eyes, he was amazed by what he saw. As he opened his green eyes, presented with a beautiful, some kind of ring made out of fire formed around him by the same flames that came out of the radio. He straightened his ears and watched in amazement as the rind of fire morphed around him and slowly disappeared around his body. In the moment it faded away, Izuku looked at his surroundings and was shocked by one simple fact: he was no longer in his home. He found himself in the middle of a vest inside a house. Its walls were covered with tasteful red wallpaper, full of black-colored flower adornments and symbols all over it. But these flowers weren't similar to the ones Izuku knew. They rather looked scary and hellish, making Izuku uncomfortable as he observed them. Some of the flowers' leaves looked like long, sharp thorns, while others had an eye in the middle of their flower. There were 2 oil paintings on the wall, one on each side, representing some parts of hell, which, of course, Izuku didn't know. One showed a scenery of a lake with mountains in that background filled with green vegetation, and a red sky with dark red clouds in the distance. The other illustrated 4 demonic-like entities in a boat in the middle of another lake, having the same colored sky and clouds the other oil painting had. The floor was made out of dark red wooden planks, and it had a small, fine, red-colored carpet in the middle of it, which was laying horizontally to the walls and was the carpet Izuku was standing on at that moment. The ceiling was also red, similar to the walls. Behind him, there was a door that was also made out of the same dark wood. The door possessed a window whose glass panes that were colored with different shades of red and yellow formed the face and antlers of a deer with red eyes. In front of the door, a red doormat, decorated with 2 black antlers and a deer skull facing forward, was placed, accompanied by a coat stand, which had holders looking like deer antlers, and a large vase next to the door, at the sides of it. The vase was ornamented with a bunch of yellow irised, narrow-pupilled eyes, and they had some kind of red petaled flowers in them with an eye at the center of their flowers. While observing the place, his shadow appeared next to him, calming and assuring its master with the fact that he was not alone. Izuku looked at his shadowy friend with small, but just as he did this, they were startled by a sound coming from a nearby room. Izuku proceeded to move his ears in the direction of the sound in order to identify it. It sounded like old-styled music. It was antique music indeed, and it sounded like it was coming out from the room at the right. So, with cautious steps and a mix of curiosity and nervosity, and with his shadowy companion at his right side, he started to walk in the direction of the music. Unbeknownst to both of them, ghostly figures watched and followed their every move. More accurately, 2 entities. They were similar to our little broccoli head's shadow, but they had a few differences. Both of them possessed pitch-black horns on the top of their heads, with one shadow having long horns pointing downwards at the end and the other shadow having short ones standing upwards, and both of them had stitches on their pitch-black bodies, like the ones a voodoo doll would have. The next place he found himself in after he left the vest was a small hall, which was decorated with the same wallpaper that the vest had and with a red carpet which was laid perpendicularly to the carpet in the vest. At both of his sides, he could access 2 rooms by going through their doorways, while there was a staircase on the right side of the wall in front of, covered with a long, red-colored carpet that came down from the top of the staircase to the bottom of it. Judging by his hearing, the music came out of the room at his right. So, with cautious and silent steps, in the shadow's case, flying, Izuku and his shadowy friend quietly approached the entrance of the room. When they got there, both of them moved their heads and peeked inside. And what they found really surprised them. It was the living room of the house they got a glimpse of. The source of the music was a gramophone that was at the right side of the room, next to the wall. Speaking of which, the walls were covered with the same wallpaper as the hall and the vest, indicating that all walls inside the house were ornamented with the same type of wallpaper. The 4 corners of the room were occupied by the same vases that were next to the door in the vest and had the same kind of flower in them. In the middle of the wall furthest away from them, a fireplace was placed with burning wood inside it. On the ends of the shelf of the fireplace, 2 blown-away candles were standing, with a demonic skull between them, while another oil painting, showing a landscape full of mountains, was hung above the shelf. But this was not visible to them, thanks to an armchair that was showing its back to Izuku and his shadow, which was standing on a large, light red-colored carpet, and between another armchair and a one-legged table with a radio, which was not turned on at the moment, on it. The armchairs had huge bone-like spikes at the sides of the armrests, curving downward with their ends pointing down to the floor. But the reason they were surprised was not that they found the living room. They were surprised because someone was sitting in the armchair. Although they didn't see the body of the person fully, but they could still witness the bit of the person's red hair, his small black antlers, and his red, black-tipped deer ears at the top of his head. Seeing someone inside the room, Izuku and his shadow started to back up, with the former doing this in fear, as quietly as possible, hoping that the man won't notice them if they get out of there. Their plan was executed perfectly, until Izuku stepped on one of the planks, making it let out a loud rasping sound as he put his left foot on it. Izuku and his shadow froze in place instantly, and looked at the plank as it let out this sound, then looked back at the man in nervousness, clinging to the hope of that sound was not heard by the person in the armchair. Unfortunately, they were not that lucky. The man in his seat moved his left ear in the direction of the sound as it went off, causing him to stick his head out from behind the armchair, thus revealing his face. He had beige-colored skin, dark red sclerae, bright red irises, thin black pupils, a dark red, oval-shaped monocle, rimmed with black, over his right eye, 2 red, black-tipped deer ears, 2 tiny black deer antlers, pinkish red hair, and a large smile on his face. Although both Izuku and his shadowy companion didn't know his identity, for the sinners of hell, there was no doubt who he was. He was Alastor, the radio demon. "Ah, I didn't see you there," Alastor said with his broad smile on his face, showing off his sharp, yellow teeth. "I was believed with the possibility that your mother was going to send you to me later, but it appears to me that I was mistaken." Alastor noted joyfully as he closed the book he was reading in his hands, put it down, stood up from his seat, stepped up to the gramophone, lifted the needle of the needle in order to stop the gramophone from playing the music, and walked up in front of Izuku with his arms behind his back, revealing his true height in the process. "Ah well, that doesn't matter anymore. You're here at last, my lad," Alastor announced cheerfully, then continued his speaking. "Looks like you have arrived safely. How was your journey?" "I hope it was a fiery experience, ah-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha." Alastor laughed as the laughter of an imaginary crowd, sounding like it was coming out of an old-fashioned radio, followed his own laughter. While Alastor was laughing, Izuku and his shadow were just standing, in the shadow's case, levitating, in shock by just the sheer size of Alastor. Izuku lowered his ears and flattened his tail in fear, covering the light green furred part of his tail with the dark green part of it. This didn't go unnoticed, however, and when Alastor finished his laugh, he glanced at his boy with his signature smile on his face. "What's with that surprised face, my boy? I've been known to tickle the ivory from time to time, but I think this is too much." Alastor chuckled, followed by the laughter of the same imaginary crowd, then crouched down to his son and looked into Izuku's eyes, showing no sign of danger. "You can calm down, my boy, there's no need to fret." Izuku didn't dare to open his mouth as Alastor spoke. He was too afraid to speak. But a lingering thought didn't allow his mind to rest. Was this man really his father? Was this cheerful, happy man, who his mother described as a mysterious, dangerous, really his other parent? He had to know. So, he gathered as much encouragement as he could and raised the question that people usually ask when they meet a new person. "Who are you?" Izuku wondered with a trembling voice, while his shadow retreated behind his back. "Oh dear, what a tragedy," Alastor declared dramatically. "I thought your mother had already told you about me." "Oh well, that isn't important. Allow me to introduce myself," the radio demon replied, placing his left hand on his chest. "My name is Alastor. I'm your father, Izuku," he revealed. Izuku's theory was true. This man, who referred to himself as Alastor, was indeed his father. How could he be his father? There were no similarities between him and Alastor. That's what Izuku thought. But as he took a closer look at Alastor's appearance, he saw that his ears and antlers that were just seemed like his own ears and antlers, including the sharp teeth in his mouth, with the exception of the difference between the color of his and Alastor's teeth. This was enough for Izuku to prove the statement Alastor said previously. With a still nervous but shocked expression on his face, he continued his questioning. "Are you my daddy?" Izuku inquired, still in shock. "Indeedy," Alastor responded cheerfully, standing up in the process, "and I was very eager to meet you for a really long time, my boy." "Are really?" Izuku wondered unsurely, still afraid of Alastor. "Of course, as your father, it is my duty to be present in my child's life," he pointed out, smiling non-stop. Then, he moved his red eyes and focused his attention on the shadow hiding behind Izuku. "Oh, a shadowy companion, I see." Alastor referred to Izuku's shadow, making it lower its pitch-black ears and back up behind Izuku even more. "Do not fear, my shadowy friend, I don't intend to hurt you," he assured. "After all, I have my shadows as well." Alastor raised his right arm, and with a simple flick of his hand, he snapped with his right middle finger and thumb. Just as he did this, 5 living shadows surrounded him from behind, including the 2 of them which were coming to him from behind Izuku and his shadow, and observed them as they walked inside the house. After the shadows got around him, Alastor's own shadow showed itself as last, doing the same thing the other shadows did. It had cyan blue eyes and a mouth with pointy, pitch-black teeth in it, a big smile, and grabbed both of its owner's shoulders. It was also as large as Alastor, who glanced at his shadowy friend with a toothy grin and hid his right arm behind his back. "See?" Alastor claimed, while Aur and his shadow looked at him and his shadowy minions in awe, especially Izuku's shadow. It believed it was the only member of its kind. It never expected there were others like it. So, with straightened ears, wide-opened eyes, and a surprised look on its face, it came out of its hideout and slowly approached its fellow shadows by levitating. Once it was between its master and Alastor, the latter's own shadow moved forward and floated before the smaller, younger shadow. They stared into their colorful eyes, until Alastor's shadow extended its pitch-black right hand for a handshake, which Izuku's shadow accepted by outstretching its own right hand and grabbing the other shadow hand. Just as it shook Alastor's shadow's hand, the radio demon's shadow wrapped its body around the smaller shadow, catching it off guard. Izuku's shadow looked at the larger one in surprise, then recognized a cyan blue smile on its face. The shadow didn't know what to make of it at first, but shared the same mimic on its face at last, enjoying the gesture of the bigger shadow. All the while Alastor and Izuku witnessed the whole scene, causing Izuku to curve a small smile on his and calm him down a little bit. "What a delightful moment," Alastor remarked. "Oh well, I suppose that's enough about regarding me. What about you, my boy? What kind of program would you desire to do to get our relationship strengthened?" Alastor asked, focusing his attention back on his little boy. As he dropped his question, all of the shadows looked at Izuku, waiting for his answer with curious eyes. Did he hear it correctly? Alastor, his father, wanted to spend time with him. With his little son? It was like a dream come true for Izuku. So, after a little amount of thinking, he decided on the place he wanted to go. "I want to go to the playground," Izuku requested, still scared a little bit. "The playground it is," Alastor cheered. "But first, we must get you a change of wardrobe," Alastor stated, pointing at the clothes Izuku was wearing. Izuku set his eyes upon his wearing with a confused and scared look, then looked back at his father. "Why?" Izuku quizzed uncertainly. "Because..." The radio demon started, moving his left hand towards Izuku's head, stopping it above his boy's head and extending his left index finger. "A gentleman must look like one," he explained as he swirled his hand over Izuku's head. At that moment, Izuku's clothes magically shifted form and look, making him really surprised. His new clothes were quite similar to the ones his father wore. He sported a green pinstripe coat with dark green lapels piped with white, which was ragged along the bottom hem. Under the coat, he wore a bright green dress shirt with a black cross on his chest, and long black dress pants with matching bright green cuffs. He also possessed a black knotted bow tie with a bright green center, black gloves with green at the fingertips, and black pointed toe boots with green deer hoofprints emblazoned on the soles. All the fear and worry that Izuku contained inside himself disappeared in an instant, and these emotions were replaced with amazement, excitement, and joy. "How did you do that?" Izuku queried with sparkling eyes and a big smile on his face. "Oh, it's just an old trick of mine, my boy. It's nothing so special." Alastor simplified as retreated his left hand and hid it behind his back. "Can you teach me that?" Izuku interrogated enthusiastically. As he heard this question, Alastor had gotten 2 wonderful ideas, but to test that his idea was accomplishable, he had to ask his little boy a certain thing to do. However, he could only pop up that question after they reached the playground. So, with his wide, toothy smile on his face, he answered Izuku's question. "Sure," Al assured, then went back to his old, cheerful himself. "Now then, let us go to the playground," he announced, then left the living room and went towards the entrance of his house, while Izuku tried to keep up with and all the shadows followed their masters. Once reaching the door, all the shadow had vanished, except Izuku's shadow, and Alastor grabbed the door handle with his short clawed right hand and pushed it downwards, thus allowing it to open outwards. When he opened the door fully, Alastor offered his left hand to Izuku to hold, which Izuku did, grabbing his left hand with his own right hand, and stepped out of the house with Izuku's shadow behind them, thus revealing the looks of the place where Alastor lived. When they got out of the house and Izuku looked around, it certainly proved one thing for him: he was clearly not at home. What he saw was a neighborhood full of houses that looked like they came from the early 30s. Most of the houses had a first floor, as Izuku thought by the size of the houses, and were mostly dark red, and possessed yards with some trees, bushes, and other plants that looked quite similar to the ones up on Earth, while in the distance he could witness larger, taller, more modernish buildings. Izuku moved his head upwards and saw the same red sky that the oil paintings had. But there was a key difference. Most of the sky was dominated by a dark red orb with a huge pentagram on its surface, and a gigantic red pentagram, which was the main defense of the city and the reason why the city was named Pentagram City. As they went down on the stoop by going down its 3 staircases and got a little bit of distance from the house, Izuku looked back at the house to see how it looked. Its color was the same as the other houses in the area, and it was one-storied as well and retained a radio antenna at the top of it. Then they began their journey to the nearest park in the area, with Alastor leading the way towards it. During their walk in that retro neighborhood, Izuku didn't see that many of the inhabitants, but he witnessed a few, and let's just say, he was utterly surprised. Some of them had human-like features with the addition of some animalistic ones, or extra limbs, or wings, while others didn't look like humans at all. And even the ones they had encountered looked at them with confusion, utter fear, or with a mixture of both emotions. As they continued their journey, the more modern structures got bigger and bigger, indicating that they were getting nearer and nearer to the end of the quarter Alastor lived. When they reached the edge of the center of Pentagram City, Alastor began to hum a song from the time he was alive, with his humming being followed by the same music playing in the background, sounding like it was coming out from a vintage radio. All the demons that were nearby went silent or hid in fear when the music got louder and louder, signaling for them that the radio demon was close. But for Izuku, it was the complete opposite. He felt calm when his father hummed this music. It ensured him that his father was at his side and he was not lost in a place he didn't know. He even enjoyed listening to the song and Alastor's humming a little bit. After a 30-minute walk, which was longer due to Alastor using the longer way and not wanting his son to witness any kind of drug or sexual-themed building, they had finally reached their destination. The dark gray gates of the park were wide open, allowing all sinners and all kinds of demons to enter it. Alastor and Izuku stepped in and found themselves in a beautiful lush forest with dirt roads guiding the visitors of the park through itself with the addition of some benches, letting the demons rest if they got tired, and some lampposts to light up the park. Izuku and his shadow were astonished by how gorgeous the forest was. It was so similar to the ones he, Kaken, and his friends usually go to explore. While they observed the forest, Alastor, who now stopped his humming and was still holding his boy's hand, looked at his son with a gentle smile. He was actually happy for his son. He didn't pretend to be his usual, cheerful, charming himself. He felt actual happiness for his little boy, like a normal parent would. What a strange feeling, he thought. The last he felt like when he was around his mother. And now, as a father, he experienced the same feeling after a long time. After a short walk, they reached a small, but more open area where they saw the playground, which, to Izuku's surprise, was not empty at the slightest. Some devil-like creatures inhabited it, playing and chasing each other, enjoying each other's company. Unlike sinners, the exterior of these beings was built on the same foundation. All of them had one pair of horns at the top of their heads, with most of them having black and white stripes on them, red skin, yellow scleres, black slitted pupils, and an arrow-tipped tail. Unbeknownst to Izuku, there were the imps, the lowest ranking in Hell's hierarchy. As they reached the edge of the playground, they stopped there and Alastor looked at Izuku, who was a little bit afraid of the imps. "Now, go and play, my boy. Enjoy yourself," the radio demon advised smilingly. "Okay," Izuku replied insecurely, then let go of his father's hand, and with his shadow behind him, he started his way shyly in the direction of the sandbox, which was occupied by no imp. "Have fun," Alastor cheered, waving for his son as he left off. Then he turned around, went to a nearby bench where he could look out for his son, and sat down on its left side. What a wonderful day we have, aren't we? He asked from a trio of imp parents who were hugging each other in fear and were shaking like a leaf at the other end of the bench thanks to his mere presence. Meanwhile, our hero and his shadowy companion quietly headed towards the sandpit, with Izuku flattening his ears and keeping his head down. He didn't dare to lift his head. Even with this, he could still feel the confused and shocked eyes of the imp kids gazing upon him as he approached the sandpit. Once reaching it, he climbed into it and began to build a small sand castle from the sand. Just as he started this, all the imp children went back to play with each other, leaving Izuku alone in the sandbox with his shadowy friend. This went on for a couple of minutes, until the sound of approaching steps became louder and louder, stopping in front of Izuku. "What are you building?" someone asked with a high-pitched voice, pointing at Izuku's unfinished castle. Izuku and his shadow looked up from his unfinished structure to see who talked to him. It was an imp girl, around the age of 5. She had red skin, hair that was kept in a baby-styled ponytail, curved horns that were leaning backwards and were pointing upwards at their ends, blackish, grayish hair, yellow scleres, red irises, black slitted pupils, long, black eyelashes, black lips, a mouth full of sharp, tiny, white teeth, a devilish tail, and red hooves. Her attire only consisted of a one-piece black dress with lots of red dots all over it and a pair of black stockings on her hooves. She was looking at our hero with her yellow eyes and an innocent smile on her face, holding her hands in front of her. "A sandcastle," Izuku answered timidly to the little imp girl, keeping his dear ears lowered. "Can I join you?" the imp girl wondered with interest. Izuku said nothing to this, just nodded with his head in approval. Seeing his response, the imp girl kneeled down to the sand in front of Izuku, and started to gather some sand with her red hand to help our little green beanie, then looked back at Izuku. "What's your name?" she queried. "Izuku Midoriya." He introduced himself. "I'm Mello. It's nice to meet you," the imp girl, referring to herself as Mello, announced, offering her red hand for a handshake. Izuku grabbed her hand and accepted the gesture of the imp girl, then went back on continuing the construction of his sandcastle. "I like your shadow," Mello praised, pointing at Izuku's shadow, which hid behind its master as she mentioned it. "Thank you," Izuku remercied shyly, looking up at Mello for a little bit, then went back on building his sandcastle. "So, are you some kind of sinner?" she inquired. "You don't look like an imp, or a succubus, or a hellhound at all." "What's a sinner?" Izuku quizzed, tilting his head to the left and raising his right eyebrow in his confusion. "You don't know?" she wondered confusedly. "They come here from the human world and stay here forever after they left that world," Mello explained. "Aren't you one?" "No, I'm a human," Izuku answered timorously. "A human?" Mello questioned, both shocked and excited at the same time. "I've never seen one. I didn't know they looked like this," Mello noted jumpily as she leaned closer to Izuku with a big smile on her face and waggling her tail in her excitement. "I always wanted to know about that world. Please tell me more about it." "Well, we have houses that we live in," Izuku started, a little bit uncomfortably thanks to how close Mello was to him. "Ooh," she cooed inquiringly and curiously. "And we have shops where we can buy food," he listed. "Woo," she marveled with starry eyes. "And we each have heroes," he finished. "What is a hero?" Mello questioned in a curious manner. With this question said out loud, Izuku's ears jolted upwards in his excitement, and Izuku was back to his well-known hero fanboy himself. "They are people who save us and protect us from villains," Izuku clarified, smiling in happiness. "Can you tell me more about them?" Mello requested with interest and a smile on her face. "Of course," Izuku agreed, and started to list his favorite heroes. "First, there's the strongest and coolest hero in our country called All Might. Then there's Endeavor, the #2 hero of Japan. Then," he detailed, then continued the listing of his favorite heroes and talking about them and about their quirks for a few hours, all the while Mello listened his fanboying throughout this time. As they proceeded with this, Alastor just watched them from the bench he was sitting on. He was delighted to see his little boy make his first friend in hell. Although it was an imp girl he was chumming up with, but as long as Izuku was not alone, he didn't care about that much. He just enjoyed observing his son having a good time. But unbeknownst to Izuku and Mello, their colloquy was about to end. During their exchange of views, An imp boy with an evil smile curved on his face slowly approached them, with a not-too-good idea in his mind. And that's why All Might's quirk can be superhuman strength, Izuku finished, ending his long theorizing on All Might's quirk. That's so awesome, Mello stated, fully excited by all the things she had just heard. And do you also have a quirk? Can I see it? She wondered curiously. Yeah, Izuku replied, then reminded himself to what the doctor said, touched his right thumb and right middle finger in order to snap with them. He snapped, and at first, nothing happened. Izuku, confused by this, he attempted to snap with them, but yet again, it didn't do anything. Finally, for the third try, he snapped with his fingers, allowing him to show his quirk to his newly found friend. When he snapped, a fiery portal appeared at his right side and a large tentacle, 3 times larger than the kneeling Izuku, came out of it, pointing at Mello with its end. "Whoa," Mello remarked in the same amazement that Izuku had by seeing his quirk for the first time. The tentacle slowly moved towards Mello, and when it reached her, it began to tickle her body, much to Mello enjoyment, who giggled innocently at this in her pleasure. "Can you control it?" she wondered as the tentacle slithered back next to Izuku. "Of course," Izuku replied, turning his right hand in the direction of the tentacle and trying to concentrate on controlling it while a bright green aura appeared around his right wrist. Then, after a short amount of time, the same aura surrounded the tentacle, and just as it showed itself, it fastly faded away from both of tentacle and Izuku's hand. After that, Izuku started moving his wrist back and forth, and to Izuku's, Mello's, and the shadow's surprise, the tentacle mimicked the move of his hand. Izuku, Mello, and Izuku's shadow witnessed this with the imp girl and the half-demon half-human boy smiling, the latter doing this with a mixture of an excited and a big one, while Alastor watched this happen in satisfaction as his son practiced one of his abilities for the very first time. "And do you have other cool powers?" Mello inquired as the tentacle Izuku was controlling went back into the portal and disappeared. "Yeah, my shadow," Izuku responded, referring to his shadowy companion which came out of its hideout nervously and levitated next to its master's left side as he mentioned it. "Does it have a name?" Mello queried curiously. "No, it isn't," Izuku replied. "Really? Ah, that's a shame," she remarked sadly, then got an idea in her mind. "Oh, I have an idea. What if I give it a name?" Mello advised happily. "You would do that?" Izuku wondered. "Of course," she answered truthfully. "Now, what its name should be?" Mello questioned as both of them started to think about a fitting name for Izuku's shadow, while the shadow was moving its head left and right, confused by not knowing what was going on. Just after a few seconds, a potential, suitable name popped up in Mello's head. "Oh, I know," Mello exclaimed, causing our protagonist and his shadowy friends to look at her in surprise. "How about Shadow? You know, since it's a shadow," she suggested. "This name is so cool," Izuku remarked excitedly, completely forgetting about his unfinished sandcastle. Then he turned his head to the left and looked at his shadow. "What do you think about it, Shadow? Do you like this name?" he asked from his shadow, which nodded in agreement. "Then it's settled. Your name will be Shadow," Izuku announced joyfully. Gaining his name, Shadow flew around them in his happiness for a little bit, then wrapped himself around Mello like a snake in his delight. Mello wasn't even surprised by this, just giggled at Shadow, freed her arms from his grip, and hugged Shadow like he was a teddy bear, which Shadow found quite enjoyable. But unfortunately for them, this wholesome moment was cut short. "Hey!" someone shouted aggressively, getting the attention of the trio. They looked at the side of the sandpit and saw the imp boy that had an evil smile on his face previously, which was now out of sight. He had black and white horns that were pointing towards the red sky of the pride ring, short, white-colored hair, red skin, yellow sclery, black slitted pupils, sharp teeth, red hooves, and a long tail. He also had a white circle around his left and white markings on his right arm, resembling small claw marks. He was wearing a black tank top and gray hose. After he got into the sandpit, he went towards our little hero and his newly found friend, and when he reached them, he looked at Izuku's sandcastle, then looked at Izuku. "That's my sandcastle," the imp boy declared, pointing at Izuku's not fully constructed sandcastle. "No, that's Izuku's sandcastle," Mello corrected, standing up from the sand and defending her friend. "Izuku? What a stupid name," the imp boy remarked rudely. "You're just like your name, stupid." he stated while Izuku flattened his ears, clenched his fists on his, and looked down at the sand of the sandpit at the edge of crying. Shadow glanced at the small imp boy with anger, then lowered his own ears in sadness and placed his right hand on his master's left shoulder in a comforting manner. "No, he's not," Mello argued. "He's nice and kind." "You know what's else nice and kind?" he questioned, then did something none of them expected. The imp boy lifted his right leg and with a swift mode, he kicked into the unfinished sandcastle, destroying it and making most of its pieces fly into Izuku's face and body, much to his discomfort. Mello gasped loudly and ran to the almost crying Izuku to help him and Shadow to clean the sand off of our little broccoli head's face. Then, after she reached her friend and began to clean off the sand from his face, Mello looked at the imp boy angrily and was about to say something to the imp boy, when suddenly, the imp boy spoke up. "Mommy, he destroyed my sandcastle," he shouted as he looked at a feminine figure sitting on another bench nearby, who stood up by hearing this, and pointed at Izuku, Shadow, and Mello. "Hey!" Mello exclaimed angrily to the imp boy, who formed a cocky smirk on his face. What the fuck had just happened? The mother of the imp bellowed belligerently as she got the sandpit and stepped into it, arriving next to her son. She had a not-so-welcoming appearance. She had horns similar to her son, lots of white spots on her red-colored body, a long red tail, yellow sclere, black slitted pupils, and black lips. She was a little bit fat and was wearing a simple gray shirt and bluish jeans which were torn apart at some places, a necklace and earrings that were made out of white orbs. "He destroyed my sandcastle," the imp boy remarked, pretending to be at the edge of crying. "No, we didn't, he destroyed it," Mello protested, pointing at the imp boy in the process. "Now, listen here, you little bitch," the imp mother started, grabbing Mello by the dress and lifting her up. "This is none of your fucking business, so you better get out of it before I smack you, you bitchy bitch," she cursed without any sign of respect. "Hey, leave my daughter alone," another imp mother exclaimed as she approached them, possibly Mello's mother. Izuku looked at his left side and glanced at Mello's mother. Her outlook was way more welcoming than the imp boy's mother. She had the exact horns that her child possessed, and the similarities of a regular imp with the addition of the red irises that her daughter had and some white spots on her tail and her right arm. She was wearing a black shirt, a red skirt, a pair of black stockings, and white-colored high heels. "Then raise some fucking manners into your little bitch of a kid, you hoe. Besides, I didn't even talk to your fucking daughter," she explained furiously, then turned her head and glared at Izuku with her rageful eyes. "Now, about you," she began, then grabbed Izuku by his shirt and pulled him to herself. "Give me one fucking reason why I shouldn't kick your effing ass so hard that your own parents won't recognize you," she threatened Izuku, whose waterworks slowly began their jobs. This was the point when Alastor had enough. Usually, he would come here to watch imp parents tear each other apart for some dumb reasons, which he delightfully enjoyed to witness. But now, this situation was different. It was Izuku, his little boy, who was about to get his butt kicked. He could never let that happen. So, after seeing this, he stood up from the bench he was sitting on, summoned his cane into his left hand, hid his hands behind his back, and walked towards the group, while trying to cover his burning anger with his usual toothy grin. When he reached them, he stopped behind Izuku and looked at the rude imp mother. "Is there a problematic situation, darling?" Alastor asked, trying to hide his hatred towards the imp mother, causing Izuku to take a look at his father while he was held by the imp mother. "Yeah, there is. Your freak of a child destroyed my son's sandkawa." She began her complaint, but immediately stopped in shock and fear when she saw who she was speaking to. The radio demon. The radio demon was in front of her in the flesh, and she was talking to him. As she was staring at him in shock, Alastor stepped a little bit closer to her. "My apologies. It appears to me that you didn't hear me perfectly, my dear. Allow me to repeat my question," Alastor said, then leaned forward to get closer to her face. "Is there a problem, darling?" he wondered once again, but now showing off the bit of his demonic form by shifting his pupils into the shape of radio dials, distorting the area around him, elongating his antlers a little bit, causing a red X on his forehead to show itself, and making various voodoo symbols to appear and float around him. "No, absolutely not, sir, not at all," the imp mother answered with a trembling voice as she dropped Izuku on the sand from her hands. "You know what? I guess we'll go now." she said, grabbing her son's hand and starting to head out of the sandpit, while Alastor still continued to watch her. Come, honey, it's time to go home. But, the imp boy began. I said, it's time to go home. The imp mother repeated to her son with a fearful expression on her face as she looked at her son, then Alastor. After they got out of the sandpit and left the area, Alastor changed back to his normal form and leaned back to his original posture, then looked at his son with his never-disappearing smile curved on his face. Are you all right, my boy? The radio demon queried with his yellow toothy grin as he glanced at Izuku and poofed his vintage microphone away. Yes, Daddy. Izuku sniffled as he cleaned off his tears, and Shadow looked at him with a concerned and a worried look on his face. That's good to hear. Alastor noted, then set his eyes upon Mello and her mother. And are you all right as well, my dears? Yeah, we're all right. Mello's mother responded in shock and a little bit of fear, which she experienced thanks to the radio demon's presence. After letting her answer known, she looked at her daughter and opened her mouth to speak once again. Come, sweetie. I think it's time for us to go home too, she stated, then attempted to grab her child's hand and leave the place as soon as she and Mello could. Okay? Mello replied gloomily, then looked at her newly found friend and his shadowy companion, who still had some sand in his hair, and waved at them. Goodbye, Izuku. Goodbye, Shadow. She said farewell, then walked out of the sandpit and at last left the playground. Keeping his ears lowered, Izuku looked at the sand in mournfulness while Shadow tried to comfort him by placing his head on his master's head and touching the top of it with his pitch-black right hand, and touching his master's chin with his pitch-black right hand while closing his eyes in sadness. After witnessing the leave of the imp girl and her mother, Alastor focused his attention on his little boy. Looks like your playtime has ended, my boy. What do you desire our next destination to be? Alastor inquired with his casual large smile. I want to eat an ice cream, Izuku stammered sadly. Then the ice cream shop it is, Alastor announced, offering his short-clawed left hand for his son to grab. Are you ready to go, my boy? Yes, Daddy. Izuku answered down in the dumpster, taking his father's hand with his right hand in the process. With this, our hero, his father, and his shadowy friend got out of the sandpit and left the playground, going back inside the forest of the park and continuing their journey on the routes of it. As they walked in the direction of the exit of the park, Izuku was still looking at the ground in his sorrowfulness, which was understandable. He didn't just possibly lose a good new friend of his who maybe he will never see again, didn't just get sand all over his face thanks to that imp boy previously, but he got bullied and even threatened as well, just like Bakugo and his friends did to him almost every day in his life. However, this didn't go unnoticed by his father. As they were on their to the exit, Alastor took a quick glimpse at his son and started to think about how to light up his son's mood again. After a little bit of thinking, Alastor finally got the perfect idea to cheer up his boy. He's going to cheer him up with the one thing that, in his opinion, can make every human and demon gladdened. He's going to tell Izuku some of his favorite and best jokes of all time. So, with the perfect plan in his head, looked at his sad son and his shadow and opened his sharp toothy mouth to speak. Don't hang your nose over those uncultured swine, my boy. Their cruel words don't worth anything at all, Alastor advised. But, Mello, Izuku started. I understand your sadness for the loss of your new friend, Alastor added, then continued. But don't you worry, my boy. I know the perfect medicine for your pain, Alastor stated cheerfully. Really? Izuku questioned bitterly, looking at his father. Of course. Allow me to tell you one, Alastor said, then began to tell his jokes. Why was the stadium so windy? The radio demon asked the question, which to Izuku hadn't reacted at all. Just went on observing the route with the same sad expression on his face. Because there were a lot of fans, ah-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. Alastor laughed with joy while an imaginary crowd followed his laughter. Oh, I have another one. What do you call an untruthful ball of jelly? Jam ball laya. He cheered as the imaginary child laughed at his joke. However, this didn't cheer up Izuku at all. He still looked at the ground in his unhappiness while Shadow tried his best to comfort him. Despite this, Alastor still continued his jokes. Here's another one. Why does Norway's navy have barcodes on the side of their ships? He asked, waiting for a little bit for Izuku to guess, which he didn't do. So when they come to port, they can Scandinavian, ah-ha-ha-ha-ha. He chortled in joy, while Izuku observed the ground with his teary eyes. Shadow, who was keeping his right hand on his master's left shoulder, looked at his master's father with his jungle green eyes and a concerned look on his face, indicating that the dad jokes weren't helping at all. Acknowledging this, Alastor finished his joke-telling, sighed, and crouched down to his son's level. "You don't have to be sad, my boy. I told you. You don't have to bother with the rude words they had told to you. Those words mean nothing," Alastor counseled, looking at his son. "But they hurt me," Izuku stuttered as tears stood in his eyes. "That's the reason why I have defended you. I didn't desire you to get hurt, and I'll never let that happen," Alastor explained, still smiling. "Then, why didn't you protect me earlier?" Izuku stated, catching his father off guard. "Pardon?" Alastor quizzed. "Why didn't you visit me and mommy sooner? You don't love me and mommy?" Izuku questioned stammeringly. This was not a question Alastor was expecting of. But what could he say to his little boy? Of course, he couldn't tell him that he didn't meet sooner because he was only able to leave Hell at certain points of the year, and could only do that for making deals with humans on Earth, just like every other overlord was allowed to do. But he had to say something to his son as an explanation for his question either. So, with a short and a little bit unsatisfied answer in his head, he opened his mouth full of sharp teeth to speak. "Well, it's rather complicated than easy," Alastor began, then looked into Izuku's eyes and placed his right hand on his left shoulder, which he was capable of thanks to Shadow moving his own right hand away just in time. "But that's why I have insisted on meeting you today, my boy. I want to fill in that I had with my presence not being around you. You're my little boy, Izuku, and from now on, as your father, I will always be in your life and I will protect you for the rest of your life," Alastor announced with a truthful tone as cleaned off a tear from his son's cheek. "Do you promise?" Izuku queried with tiny tears in his eyes. "I swear by my life, my boy. After all, I'm a man of my word," Alastor reassured jokingly. After this, something unexpected happened. Izuku hugged the radio demon. Alastor was absolutely shocked by this and a tiny bit uncomfortable, hence he didn't like being touched too much. But he endured it due to the need of emotional support for his son. "Thank you, Daddy. I love you," Izuku stated as he hugged his father tightly. How long had Alastor not heard this sentence? Years, literal decades, and this strange, warm sensation he felt in his heart since he had met his little boy. This strange feeling brought back so many memories of his mother, some of which he thought he almost forgot. How she loved him, took care of him, helped him, just like a real mother should do her child. And now, this feeling made him clear that he's the next one in the line. It's his turn to raise and take care of his own child, just like his mother did to him all those years ago. So, to comply with this, he slowly hugged Izuku and caressed his hair in the process. "I love you too, Izuku, I love you too," he assured with a low tone. Even Shadow joined the wholesome moment by wrapping himself around too slowly, laying his head on Alastor's head once he was done with this. They kept doing this for a couple of seconds. Then Izuku let Alastor go and broke the hug, just like Shadow did. After the end of the hug, Alastor looked at his boy, raised his right arm, and with his clawed hand, he wiped Izuku's tears away from his face. "Have you calmed down, my boy?" Alastor inquired. "Why, yes," Izuku answered, then raised his ears and sniffed for one last time. "Then let us go to the ice cream shop. We don't want the ice cream to catch a cold." Alastor cracked the joke. This small joke finally made Izuku chuckle, making Alastor satisfied with the fact that the cheer-up of his son was successful. Just when Alastor stood up from his crouch and both of them observed each other with smiles on their faces, a sudden third voice directed for them was heard from not far away. "Alastor?" a feminine voice said a few feet away from them. Both Izuku and Alastor looked at their sides to see who was speaking to them. To be honest, Izuku found the person's appearance kinda strange and a little bit of a shock. The figure who was standing in front of them was a female demon. Her height was rather tiny, just a little bit larger than Izuku's. She had one eye, just like a cyclops. Her one large eye had a hot pink and yellow sclere with a light yellow iris and a black pupil. She also possessed a single eyebrow and white skin. She sported short pink hair with a yellow highlight. Her teeth were light yellow and were as sharp as knives. She also had a pair of small pink dots at the corners of her mouth, evocative of dimples. Her wearing consisted of a red 1950s made dress with a white apron over it and 3 red dripping splotches on it, looking like small stains of blood. She was also wearing a dark red neckerchief. She had small, pointed, dark red legs and black arms with short claws at her fingertips. She was holding a reddish paper bag in her left hand with something in it, while her other was free. She also obtained an innocent smile on her face. As Izuku and Shadow observed the newcomer, they hid behind the leg of the former's father in the mixture of shyness and anxiousness, fearing that she was going to act like the rude imp mother. Izuku looked at his father with lowered ears and in despair, not knowing what he was going to do. To his surprise, Alastor happily approached the person, recognizing her immediately at sight. "My dear Nifty." The radio demon greeted his female friend-servant with his joyfulness as he got to her, and Izuku tried to keep up with him. "How have you been? What brought you into this gorgeous park?" he queried with interest. "Hi, Alastor. I was just shopping in the city, and as I was doing that, I picked up a snack for you," Nifty explained, handing over the bag in her left hand to Alastor. "I've called you about it, but you didn't answer the phone, so I thought it would be a great surprise for you," she said with a sweet and innocent smile on her face. "Thank you, darling," Alastor thanked, then took the bag from Nifty with his right hand. After that, he grabbed the bag with both of his hands and looked into it to see its contents. Thanks to his father's height, Izuku couldn't see what the bag contained. He was only to see the bottom of the bag. But truth be told, he was lucky he didn't witness what was inside it, because if he had done that, he would have been terrified at the bare minimum. The bag had normal food in it that a demon would consume, a few drinks, and a freshly cut-off tongue of a demon with a strange yellow saliva on it. Most of the humans and demons would have freaked out by seeing this, but not Alastor. The cannibal father even widened his smile in his delightfulness by looking at his surprise snack, then looked at his friend. "Oh, my dear Nifty, you're always so thoughtful," he remarked with utter joy. "You're welcome," Nifty replied, with her answer followed by her innocent giggle. Then, she heard something moving behind Alastor. She tilted her head and noticed Izuku hiding behind Alastor. When she looked at our young hero, he retreated his head back behind the leg of his father in shy, not wanting her to notice him. But unfortunately for him, that was not the case. When Nifty looked at Izuku, she almost immediately recognized who he was. She would always recognize that small baby boy she saw on Alastor's special radio almost 4 years ago. But just to ensure the stability of her theory, she looked at Alastor and opened her mouth to speak. But just as she wanted to do that, the radio demon interrupted her. "Oh, how rude of me. I've almost forgotten to introduce you to someone special, my dear," Alastor declared cheerfully as he lowered his arms with the left one holding the bag, then turned his head to the left and looked down at his little boy who was hiding behind him with his own shadowy friend. "Come now, don't be shy," Alastor advised his son. Izuku, with slow and cautious steps, not caring about the bag anymore, left his hideout with Shadow following him behind his back. When he fully got out and showed off his appearance, Nifty was 100% sure that he was indeed the baby boy she saw all those years ago. He was Izuku Midoriya. After revealing himself, Izuku walked next to his father, who looked back at Nifty with his iconic smile. "My dear Nifty, I would like to introduce you to my sweet little boy, Izuku Midoriya," Alastor announced, then turned his head to see his son. "Say hi to Nifty, my boy," he requested. Izuku lifted his head a little bit and moved his eyes to take a look at the tiny Cyclops demon in front of him. "Hi," he said in a low tone, introducing himself to Nifty. Seeing Alastor's son in the flesh for the first time, Nifty gasped loudly and ran to our broccoli head and to his shadow with a speed they didn't believe she was capable of. "I can't believe it. I can finally meet you. I've waited so long for this," she cooed excitedly while jumping up and down in her excitement, then stopped to take a closer look at his appearance. "You look just like your father. You're so cute," she noted, referring to his deer ears and antlers as she grabbed Izuku's cheeks with both of her tiny black hands and moved it to different sides. When she moved his head downwards to see his antlers and flattened ears more closely, he discovered something really disastrous, at least for her. She noticed the tiny pieces of sand stuck into his hair. Although it was just a small amount, she couldn't stand leaving it like that. "Oh my goodness, look at your hair. It's full of sand. And it's so messy," she pointed out disconcertedly, placing Izuku's head to the position where he could face her. "We have to fix. "Come on," she declared, then took Izuku's right hand with her left hand and fastly ran to a nearby bench with him, while Shadow tried to keep up with them and Alastor followed them with casual steps. Shortly after, they had reached the bench, and when they did, Nifty stopped in front of it, let Izuku's hand, and looked at him. "Sit on it, please," Nifty requested Izuku kindly, pointing at the bench. Izuku, after getting the request, began to climb up on it. When he was finished, he sat down on it nervously and faced the other three in the process. After that, Nifty quickly climbed up as well, walked to our hero, and placed herself behind his back. As she performed this, she took a dark red wooden hairbrush with a lighter red pentagram in the middle of it out of her right pocket with her right hand. How she got it, no one knew. When she got it out, she lifted it above Izuku's head, preparing herself to brush it. "Now, hold still," she suggested, lowering her right hand with the hairbrush in it, getting closer and closer to Izuku's hair. Izuku closed his eyes in fear, readying himself for what was going to come. But when he felt that the object touch his head, he was pleasantly surprised, making him jolt up his ears. Nifty didn't hurt him with the hairbrush. Instead, she began to clean and adjust his hair gently with the hairbrush. He looked up at his father's tiny friend with surprise, who, when he observed her, presented him with a sweet grin on her face. "What?" Nifty quizzed, then realized why Izuku was looking at her like that and chuckled at it. "You thought I was going to hurt you? Don't be silly, sweetie, I would never do that," she assured, smiling at him. "Now, please turn your head forward so I can continue my work," she requested. This remark calmed down Izuku, and he complied with the request, turning his head to a position where he could face Alastor and Shadow, and allowing Nifty to continue to brush his hair. This was the perfect opportunity for Alastor to finally ask that little certain requests of his from his little boy to do. The requests that could prove his two theories regarding something special about him. The requests that were mainly because of one simple thing that both of them possessed, although Izuku's was not as strong as Alastor's. The requests that were inside Alastor's mind for one very single reason, to test the true capabilities of his little boy's powers. So, with a plan inside his head, he looked at his son with interest and moved his mouth in order to open and allow him to speak. "My dear sweet boy, if you allow me, may I ask you a question?" Alastor wondered. "Yes, Daddy," Izuku replied joyfully, while Nifty continued to his hair and found it adorable how he called Alastor. "I've witnessed that when we were at the playground, you showed off your abilities to your little friend of yours. May I see it as well?" Alastor queried. "Of course," Izuku replied happily, then proceeded to snap with his fingers on his right hand, just like how he did when he showed his quirk to Mello as Shadow floated to his right side. He flicked with his right hand unsuccessfully 3 times, until finally, on the 4th attempt, he accomplished it with flying colors. As he snapped with his right thumb and right middle finger, the same massive tentacle appeared from the fiery portal on the ground route of the park between Alastor and Izuku. Izuku looked at the tentacle with a huge smile, while Nifty's face was accompanied by a surprised expression as she stopped in her half-completed job. All the while Alastor's face didn't change one bit. Here came one of 2 moments the radio demon was mostly curious for. As he observed the pitch-black tentacle, he moved his attention to his own little boy once again. "My dear little boy, now may I ask you one very single thing?" Alastor wondered, then got to the main point. "Would you be so kind to summon all of them?" Al requested. "But the doctor said that I can't control that many," Izuku pointed out worryingly. "I understand that, but do not fear, my boy. I assure you nothing bad will occur," the radio demon reassured his son. "Okay," Izuku answered insecurely. After his reply, he looked at his right hand nervously, not so sure to do what his father asked him for. But if his father told him nothing bad will happen, he should do it, right? With this thought in his mind, he slowly moved his fingers and snapped with them once again, now successfully for the first try. At the moment he did this, 5 other tentacles showed off around Izuku from 5 separate fiery portals. All 6 of them surrounded the bench from the front, forming the half of a circle in the process. Izuku was amazed by seeing these enormous tentacles surrounding him, and to his surprise, they didn't wreak havoc and chaos as he expected. After he summoned them, he looked at the tentacles on his right side, cautiously turned his right hand in the direction of the tentacles, and concentrated his mind on 3 tentacles out of the 6 in order to control them. Not long after, the same green aura from before covered his right hand, and it quickly spread to the 3 tentacles he focused on. The green light quickly vanished, just like it did when Izuku got control over the 1 tentacle he showed to Mello. He moved his hand a little bit, making the 3 tentacles change positions at his command. To his shock, it wasn't hard to direct these tentacles at all. It was as easy as dictating a singular tentacle. In his amazement, he turned his head to the left and raised his left hand, attempting to control the other 3 tentacles just like he did with the previous 3. He accomplished that task as well, making the tentacles glow in green color and causing the aura to disappear. He moved his left wrist back and forth to see if those moved at his will, which was exactly what the tentacles did, mimicking the moves of Izuku's hand. For the last experiment, he moved both his hands simultaneously to test if the tentacles followed his movement. To his surprise, they did. They followed every single move of his hands. Both he and Shadow witnessed in wonderment as this happened, with the former adopting one of the biggest smiles of his current on his face, while Nifty was almost done with the brush of Izuku's hair. As they observed this event occur, with the flick of his own right hand, Alastor poofed a tiny sheet of paper into his right hand with 5 red, strange symbols on it and writings under them. He placed his vision on his little boy who was filled with happiness and extended his right hand with the paper in it towards his son. "Now, my boy, would you take this little paper and read it out what it says?" Alastor wondered, handing over the paper to Izuku. "Sure," our protagonist replied excitedly as he took the piece of paper out of his father's hand and all of the tentacles retreated back to their portals. But as he and Shadow looked at the paper and what was on it, they became really confused when they saw the symbols and the writings on it. Unbeknownst to them, they were looking at voodoo symbols and their meanings. Despite the confusion, Izuku opened his mouth and began to list what the writings said. "Loco, Calfu, Papa Legba, Santa Muerte, Ogaun." He read out confusedly. Just as he said these words, something happened that he never thought of. When he read those symbols, fire erupted from his palms, lighting up the small paper on fire and incinerating it to ashes and forming a ball of fire above his palms. Both Izuku and Shadow witnessed this in shock, while Nifty stopped her nearly finished work and observed the fire with an excited smile, which was quite understandable from a former pyromaniac. But soon that shock Izuku possessed turned into astonishment and excitement as a broad smile formed on our little broccoli head's face and looked at his father. "Look, Daddy, I can make fire," he beamed excitedly, then went back to examine his ball of fire and decided to play with it a little bit as his father continued to watch his doing. Now these 2 successful experiments showed Alastor that his theories were true and the doctor didn't know anything about Izuku's true power. Aside from the royal family and the 7 deadly sins, the dark energies of hell are the crucial factors that allow the overlords and other strong demonic entities to use their powers at their maximum. And since this only works on the sinner citizens of hell, no human could exploit this power source. But Izuku was different. Thanks to his demonic side, Izuku was capable of accessing the power of this special energy source, thus allowing him to use his quirk without any boundaries, as it was seen when he controlled all of the 6 tentacles at once. Not only that, it appeared that his little boy even inherited the basics of his voodoo magic as well, and he could use this magic without any difficulties in hell, just like when he did with the tentacles. And that opened up countless possibilities. He could teach any kind of voodoo magic to his son, useful for both good and evil, with the latter being the one that Alastor preferred more. Not only that, with this, Izuku could be able to unlock more of his abilities. Pyrokinesis, phytokinesis, portal creation between hell and the earth, outfit alteration, manifestation, etc. Of course, on Earth, it would be a lot harder to learn and use the abilities, but with a lot of practice and with his help, his little boy could become a true overlord, maybe stronger than him. But that had to wait. The main focus now was that he had to spend some quality time with Izuku. Speaking of which, Izuku was still playing with the ball of fire, bouncing it up and down, causing Alastor to look at him with his own wide smile. "Have you played enough with the fire, my boy?" Alastor asked, making Izuku set his eyes upon him. "Yes, Daddy," Izuku responded, then levitated the fireball into his hand and closed his wrist, making the ball of fire vanish in his hand. "Then let us go to the ice cream shop," Alastor declared. After his declaration, Izuku was about to get off of the bench. But he was quickly stopped by his father. "But before that, let my dear Nifty finish what she started," the radio demon pointed out, making Izuku stay in place. "And I'm done," Nifty announced, raising the hairbrush out of Izuku's hair and putting it back into her right pocket. Then, out of her left pocket, she took out a fancy dark red hand mirror with a small yellow eye on the top and handed it over to Izuku, who grabbed the mirror and looked into the mirror to see his hair. To his surprise, his hairstyle had changed. Instead of the usual look of his hair, the style of his hair was now similar to his father's hair, without Alastor's undercut at the back. He observed his new hair in wonderment as Nifty tilted her head to Izuku's left side and looked at him. "Do you like it?" she inquired, smiling innocently. "It's so awesome. Thank you, Auntie," Izuku remercied happily. "You're welcome," she answered while smiling at him gently, although Izuku calling her his aunt caught both her and Alastor off guard. After her reply, Izuku got off of the bench and started to shoot it ahead, getting a little bit of distance between him, his father, and his newly founded aunt, all the while Shadow tried to keep up with his master. "Come on, Daddy, come on, Auntie, let's go to the ice cream shop," he exclaimed as he ran in the direction of the exit of the park, which he didn't know where it was. "Wait for us, my boy," the radio demon shouted to his son, who seemed like he didn't hear it. Then, Alastor turned his head and set his eyes upon the little female cockroach demon next to him on the bench. "Care to join us on our journey, my dear Nifty?" Al inquired. "Of course," she responded cheerfully. "Splendid," he amused joyfully. "Well then, let us follow my little boy before he gets lost," Alastor advised, with Nifty agreeing in silence. With this, Nifty got off of the bench quickly and ran after Izuku with her tiny legs as fast as she could, trying to get to him in order to keep him safe and provide him with her company as long as Alastor went after them with ordinary steps. After several minutes, he got to the exit of the park, where Nifty, Shadow, and Izuku were waiting for him. With his little boy stopped and was calmed down by Nifty. However, he was still excited after the whole fire and tentacle thing. And thus, with all four of them in the group, with Izuku and Shadow between Alastor and Nifty, they stepped through the gate of the park and continued their way towards the nearby ice cream shop. Throughout their journey, they didn't cross ways with lots of sinners and demons thanks to Alastor's presence, with the exception of a demon who was playing on a saxophone, whom Alastor even gave a coin as a payment for the good music he played. They also witnessed the rampage of a certain huge airship in the sky, shooting projectiles all over the west side of the city. This made Izuku scared, but his father assured him that it won't come near to their location. They continued their way to a point where the ice cream shop was even visible at the corner of the street. They were about to go straight towards it, when our protagonist, his shadowy friend, and his father noticed that the fourth member of their squad was missing. They moved their bodies and turned around to see where did Nifty go, which to they instantly got their answer as they looked in the direction of her position. When they looked at her, Nifty was standing between two other demons, with one looking like a red humanoid lizard and the other seeming to have a floating light green head with his hair flowing like water. At that moment, Nifty was looking at some TVs with different kinds of advertisements in the TV monitors with a curious look. Alastor was the first one to speak. "My darling Nifty, may I ask what are you doing?" Alastor wondered as he, Izuku, and Shadow approached her. "Sorry, Alastor, I just wanted to check some ads to see if they showed anything interesting," Nifty explained as the trio got to her position. When they looked at the TV screens, Izuku was a little bit confused by what he saw. He was not confused due to the wall fully covered with lots of TVs. He was baffled by the one who was advertising the products, with one being some kind of cereal called Voot Floop, and another one looking like some kind of speaker named Valkyrie. He looked like a man with a flat-screen TV for a head. He had two eyes with red scleres and light blue pupils, with the outline and the wrinkles of his left eye being cyan. As it seemed to Izuku, his mouth was full of sharp teeth that glowed light blue. His skin was dark gray, with his fingers possessing a light blue color from the second knuckle. He was wearing a black top hat with red and blue designs reminiscent of a broadcast symbol and a radio wave symbol, respectively. He also possessed a TV antennae that stuck out at the top of his hat, with the right one bent into a zigzag. The rest of his attire was made out of a dark blue tuxedo with lighter stripes and a black and red striped shirt. He also had a red bow tie and a light blue undershirt with an upside-down broadcast symbol. Although Izuku didn't know this, but this was his first encounter with Vox, the one who was showing off these cool products, the one who was the overlord of television, the one who was one of the 3VS, and the one who was his father's old-time rival. As all four of them stared at the TV screens, with Izuku and Shadow raising their left eyebrows, tilting their heads to the right and lowering their right ears in confusion, Alastor let out a sigh and looked at his nemesis with a big, disappointed smile on his face. "Really nothing good on these days, HM?" Alastor questioned as he witnessed his big rival advertise his disgusting products to the brainwashed consumers of his small-screen entertainment program enjoyers. As he made his presence known, the two unknown demons looked at him in fear and flee from the place, making Izuku and Shadow even more confused as they watched them run away. However, they didn't know that the next phenomena they were about to witness will terrify them to their very core, especially Izuku. As they looked at the two demons leave their location in a hurry, they suddenly heard some strange interference sound from the direction of the TVS, causing them to turn their heads to look at the TVS. But when they looked at the TVS, something was clearly not all right. There was nothing on the TV screens aside from Vox, who was looking at them from every screen. As they continued to watch it happen, the screens began to change. The number of the pictures of Vox on the screens started to decline. However, at the same time, Vox's stature began to rise bigger and bigger, until all of the TV screens were occupied by a huge Vox, staring directly at them and looming over them with a toothy, evil grin on his face and chuckling with a robotic voice. As Izuku and Shadow flattened their ears in fear and hid behind the leg of Alastor, both Nifty and Alastor raised their eyebrows in confusion, with the latter still smiling. "Show off. All hat and no cattle," the radio demon remarked, then turned his head and looked behind to see his son. "Come, my boy, leave this nobody alone," he requested from his horrified son as set off from the TV display of a window-fronted store, with Izuku following him and trying to hide from Vox, which was not accomplishable. As Vox looked at Izuku through the TV monitors, his smile disappeared in a millisecond and his red eyes widened in shock by seeing a human kid, who had the same type of ears tail as Alastor, standing next to the radio demon without showing any kind of fear towards Alastor. He followed the move of the group with his eyes until they got away from the window of the store, thus getting out of his sight. After this little drawback, Izuku slowly calmed down and went back to his joyful himself, while Nifty, Shadow, and Alastor followed him from behind, with the latter trying not to let out his frustration by ranting about how much of a jackass Vox was. And thus, after like 4 minutes of walking, they finally reached the ice cream shop. It was not a very crowded area from the outside, but there were still some demons who were walking around the area. As they crossed the road and got to the shop, Alastor grabbed the door handle of the two-doored entrance of the shop, pushed it downwards, and opened the door outwards, allowing Izuku and Shadow to enter the shop. The inside of the ice cream shop was rather ordinary, with some tables and chairs in the store, with some of the chairs occupied by imps and a few sinners. Izuku ran to the counter, and with wide eyes and a big smile on his face, he observed the vast selection of ice cream flavors, not knowing which one to choose. As he looked at the different types of ice creams, Shadow, Alastor, and Nifty got next to our protagonist, while all of the visitors and employees of the shop looked at the radio demon with fright and worry. When they got to him, Alastor looked at our sweet broccoli head and opened his toothy mouth to speak up. "So, my boy, what type of sweet icy delicacy do you desire?" Alastor inquired from his little boy. After a little bit of thinking, with an excited face, Izuku looked at his father with his answer ready to be told. "I want chocolate." "1 ball of chocolate ice cream, young man," the radio demon ordered to the worker behind the counter. "Yes, sir," the worker replied with a trembling voice. Then he gave Izuku an ice cream cone and grabbed the ice cream spoon with his right hand and scooped a ball of ice cream with it and put it on Izuku's ice cream cone. "Thank you," Izuku beamed, then started to lick the icy sweetness with his tongue. After observing his son eating his own ice cream, Alastor turned his head back to the worker behind the counter and focused his attention on him. "And what kind of ice cream do you want, my dear Nifty?" Alastor wondered, turning his head towards his female Cyclops friend. "I choose vanilla," Nifty announced excitedly. "Then I would prefer a scoop of red meaty strawberry," he asked the worker. As Izuku heard this, he thought that the ice cream his father wished for was just a special strawberry ice cream. but he was too busy with his own ice cream to ask it. Truth be told, he was far from the truth. Red meaty strawberry was indeed a strawberry ice cream, but it had a slight difference from the regular one. Only the flavor was just strawberry. The whole ice cream was made out of the flesh and the organs of dead demons. So to put it short, it was an ice cream for cannibals, like Alastor. And although Alastor was not a fan of ice cream, but when he was in the mood, he always chose this type of ice cream. "I'm sorry, sir, but we ran out of red meaty strawberry and vanilla," the worker explained. "Really? Oh well, what a shame," Alastor said. "But I can check if we had any red meaty strawberry and vanilla in the storage," the worker pointed out, then jolted out of the room, possibly towards the storage of the shop. "It appears that this will take much longer than I expected," Alastor noted with a tired sigh, then turned his head towards his little boy who was enjoying his own ice cream. "My dear sweet boy, would you wait outside for us? I won't take too long," he advised to his happy son. "Okay, Daddy," Izuku answered. Then, with his ice cream in his hands and shadow behind his back, he rushed towards the exit of the shop and ran through it, exiting the shop. He didn't even need to open it, thanks to another demon entering the ice cream shop at that moment. She was a female demon with a slender body, pale white skin, sharp white teeth, eyes with only black scleres, and a very long neck. She acquired short white hair and similar to the radio demon, she was smiling. She was wearing a red dress with gray shoulder pads, a black belt, and black wrists. She had a red sun hat with 2 skulls and 3 black flowers on the front side, with a large red and black plume on the top side. The demon woman stepped to the side in surprise as Izuku ran out of the shop and past her, making her smile disappear for a split second thanks to the unexpected phenomena. Not a very usual event to witness," the demon remarked as she watched Izuku stop near the shop and continue the consumption of his ice cream. But suddenly, her surprise became even huger when a certain former radio host accosted her. "Rosie, my dear," Alastor exclaimed in joyfulness as he and Nifty approached her. "Alastor?" Rosie quizzed in confusion. "That's my name, don't wear it out," he laughed, with his imaginary crowd following him with their own laughter and Rosie giggling at him. "Hi, Rosie," Nifty greeted. "Hello, my darling Nifty." Rosie returned her greeting fondly. "Sorry for my silliness, darling. I'm just in the mood," he apologized, cutting off his laughter. "May I ask what are you doing here, my dear friend?" the radio demon inquired. "I was carving for a little red meaty strawberry, so I've decided to visit this place," Rosie explained, then continued. "I was about to open the door and step in when a small sinner ran past me and almost hit me. I'm starting to think that there are no more manners," she declared, letting out a tired sigh. "Oh, that was no sinner at all, my dear Rosie. It was my sweet little boy, Izuku," he corrected, causing the leader of Cannibal Colony to widen her eyes. Rosie blinked in shock and surprise by hearing this from her old friend, causing her to say only 2 words, "You're what?" Meanwhile, our protagonist went on licking his chocolate peacefully and cheerfully, like every child would do if they had ice cream in their hands, while his shadowy companion observed his act. It was like a tranquility that no one thought it could be disturbed. However, this was never the case. Why, would you ask? Because Izuku and Shadow were not alone. From a dark alleyway behind their backs, a demon glanced at them from the dark. When he saw Izuku, a sinful idea had been born in his mind and formed a devilish smile on his face. He quietly approached the kid in front of him, not wanting to reveal his presence. When he was close enough, he stepped out of the alley, showing off the looks of his body. When he was close to Izuku, he opened his filthy mouth to speak. "Hey, baby boy," the demon started, causing Izuku and Shadow to look behind their backs. When they turned around, they saw a tall, beetle-like demon with 4 arms, blue skin, bright blue eyes, sharp white teeth, and 2 pair of insect wings. He was wearing a ripped dark blue jacket, a pink tank top, and ripped brown jeans. "Sorry to interrupt you, but I have a really big problem. I want to play a game that needs 2 people and I can't find a partner. Can you play that game with me? It feels really nice too," the demon explained with a deep voice as the smell of alcohol exited his mouth. "Of course," Izuku replied happily, not suspecting anything. "Good, then follow me." the demon suggested, making his way towards the same alley as Izuku and Shadow followed, with the latter a bit confused why this stranger wanted to play with his master. Izuku was pretty confident at first, but as they slowly got to the entrance of the alley, he became more and more unsure about this whole play thing. When the sinner entered the darkness of the alley, Izuku and Shadow stopped at the edge of the dark alley, not moving even an inch and making the beetle-like sinner look back at the boy with confusion and a little bit of frustration. "What's up? You're afraid of the dark or what?" the demon questioned. "No, but..." Izuku began with flattened ears, but he was cut short by the demon. "Then don't be a fucking baby and come in," the demon ordered, with his voice filled with more frustration and anger, intimidating Izuku and making Shadow fly in front of his master for the case if he had to defend him. I think I'm going to go be back to my daddy," Izuku responded, stepping a few backwards in the process. "You won't go fucking anywhere," the demon shouted, then stretched out one of his arms towards our protagonist. But his hand was stopped by Shadow, who was in his protective mode. The same mode he was in when he thought the doctor wanted to hurt Izuku, clawed his hand with his pitch-black talons. The demon pulled back his arm in pain, causing him to give a chance to Izuku to run away. Izuku turned and ran as fast as he could, but his plan of fleeing was unsuccessful thanks to the demon extending all of his arms in the direction of Izuku, thus grabbing him with his blue-colored hands. "Let me go," Izuku demanded as he dropped his ice cream and got more and more desperate and frightened, while Shadow tried to free him, but to no avail. "I didn't have a goddamn good time since I came to this shithole. Now, I'll have my fun," the sinner shouted as he loomed over Izuku, whose waterworks began to function in fear. "Don't worry, kid, it won't hurt you much," he advised with an evil grin. Izuku's tears began to flow like a waterfall in despair and fear during this. What was he going to do? How could he get out of this situation? As a last attempt, he opened his mouth and shouted towards the red sky of the Pride Ring. "Help! Help! Help me!" he cried out in a desperate attempt. "No one is coming, kid," the demon pointed out, frightening Izuku with his remark. However, unbeknownst to both of them, his statement was shortly going to be disproved. After 3 seconds he said this, 6 giant black tentacles, much larger than Izuku's tentacle, appeared around them from fiery portals. The beetle demon looked up at the tentacles when suddenly, one of them swooped down at his and punched him to the left wall of the alley, making a huge crack on the wall. The demon fell off from the wall and landed on his face hard, injuring himself even more. The tentacles slithered towards the demon and wrapped themselves around the limbs of the sinner and lifted him up into the air, restraining him in place. "Hey!" the demon shouted angrily as he tried to free himself. With Shadow at his side and with his teary eyes, Izuku looked at the demon kept in place by tentacles with confusion, not knowing what was going on. But when a familiar voice sounded off behind him, he exactly knew who was the one who summoned the tentacles. "Out of all the sinners in hell," Alastor began, with his right hand raised into the air and enveloped in a red aura, while Nifty and Rosie were standing behind him, with the former holding her vanilla ice cream in her left hand and Alastor's paper bag in the crook of her left arm, and the latter having 2 red meaty strawberry ice creams in her arms. "Your type is far by the one that disgusts me the most," Alastor said with anger in his voice. "Daddy," Izuku exclaimed as he ran towards his father and melted into tears of relief and fright, with Shadow forming back to his original form and flying after his master. "My boy!" the radio demon exclaimed as he crouched down and extended his left arm in the direction of his son. When Izuku reached him, he hugged him tightly immediately and continued to cry, making Alastor's coat stained by his tears, which Alastor didn't care about. "Are you all right?" Alastor asked with a worried tone. "He wanted to hurt me. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. I thought you wouldn't come," Izuku confessed as he began to cry even harder and tightened his grip on his father. These words cut deep into Alastor. How could his little boy give even a single thought that he wouldn't come if he was in trouble? Not only that, but how could he, the radio demon, let this happen? What kind of father was he? He was not there for his little boy for 4 years. He let him become bullied and hurt. He would never let that happen again. He had to, no he must, set an example to show the demons of hell what happens to the ones who lay a finger on his little boy. And this was a perfect chance to present it. As he thought over this, he observed his crying boy and hugged him with his left arm to comfort him. "SHSH, don't worry, my boy. I'm here. No one can hurt you now," he assured as hugged his son closer with his arm. "Alastor." Nifty started with a serious tone, drawing out a large knife from her right pocket with her right hand. "Let me handle him." "No, I'll take care of him," he declared with a serious tone, then looked at his little boy with a caring smile. "My boy, could you do a favor for me and wait for me with my dear Nifty and Rosie? I have to speak with this gentleman," Alastor advised, making Izuku look at him with tearful eyes. "But," Izuku started. "Do not fear, my boy. It won't take long, and I promise that from now on, I won't take even a single step away from you for the rest of the afternoon, okay?" The radio demon assured his boy. "Okay," Izuku sniffed, accepting his father's advice. "That's my boy," Alastor remarked. With this, Izuku and Al released their hugs, and with still a little bit teary eyes, Izuku walked towards the two female demons, looking at the ground as he did this. When he reached them, with a smile on her face, Rosie gave the ice cream in her right hand to Nifty, who took it with her only free hand and had a concerned expression on her face due to Izuku's condition, bent down, and extended her right for Izuku to grab it. "Come now, darling, leave your father alone a little bit," Rosie advised. Izuku looked up to witness who was speaking to him. When he saw her face, he got even more scared due to the unsettling pupilless and irisless eyes of Rosie, which was easily noticed by her. "Don't worry, darling, I don't bite," she reassured with a smile on her face. Izuku hesitated for a bit, then grabbed her right hand with his left hand, and with her and Nifty at his sides, Izuku walked away from his father, the other demon, while Alastor observed them leave. When they were far enough and got out of the audible range, Alastor focused his attention on the demon held by his tentacles in front of him. "What is your fucking problem, asshole? I was about to have a good time, but you fucking cock-blocked me. Who the fuck do you think you are?" the demon questioned furiously as the tentacles kept him in place. "Looks like you're new here. Well, allow me to offer some insights," he offered, then slowly began to rise in size, with his antlers growing longer and longer and his claws becoming elongated. "In this world, you're free to do whatever you want, whatever you desire, whatever is your dream," he continued as he became larger and larger. "There's only one little rule," he said as he turned into a form that horrified the demon to his very core, causing him to mess up his pants. "Do not touch my son," he finished with a deep voice, revealing his most terrifying form. His body plan was similar to a Wendigo. He had a wide smile that was anatomically impossible. His irises and pupils vanished, and only his sclea remained with them, changing their colors to pitch black. His antlers were elongated and large, just like his claws, which were now long talons, capable of cutting through anything. He was much more taller, and the middle of his body was as lean as a stick. If a sinner saw the radio demon in this appearance, they knew it meant only one thing: he was in his full demon form. And if someone saw this form of his with their eyes, they instantly knew why it was like this. He was angry. And everyone knew what was the fate of the ones who made him angry. The beetle demon tried to escape the grip of the tentacles, but to no avail. As he wiggled, the seventh tentacle Alastor summoned wrapped around his mouth, shutting him up for one singular reason: to make his screams unhearable. When this was done, the radio demon raised his right hand and struck down with it towards the demon's body, thus beginning the activity he was most skilled in and liked the most besides making deals. As this was going on, 4 buildings away from Alastor's location, Izuku, Shadow, Nifty, and Rosie were waiting for him to finish his speak to the demon that almost raped Izuku. In the meantime, the other overlord and the radio demon's small feminine servant decided to cheer the sniffing and still a tiny bit crying young half-demon boy up as much as possible. Nifty was the first one to break the silence. "Are you all right, Izuku? Did he hurt you?" she wondered worriedly. "No," Izuku answered down in the dumpster, while Shadow observed his master with a concerned look, judging by the shape of his eyes and his flattened ears, which was the only aspect he shared with Izuku. "Okay," Nifty said with a tired sigh, then stretched out her left arm, offering her untouched ice cream to him. "Here, take this." "Thank you, Auntie," he thanked, then proceeded to lick and the vanilla ice cream with his tongue, while a few tears still hung on his cheeks and face. You're welcome. Nifty replied with a small smile on her face, starting to enjoy the fact that Izuku addressed her as his aunt. It didn't take much for Rosie either to start a conversation with our little broccoli head when she noticed the tears on his cheeks and the remnants of his chocolate ice cream around his mouth. Oh, poor darling, your face is full of tears and melted chocolate. And you wanted to walk around like this? Rosie questioned, not in a scolding manner, but in a caring one. Tut, tut. It is not befitting of a young gentleman like you to look like this. Let me handle it, she advised, then took a red textile handkerchief out of her right pocket and gently cleaned Izuku's face and mouth with it. After that, she put the handkerchief back into her pocket and looked at the results of her job. Now, you look far more dashing, darling. Thank you, ma'am, Izuku remercied with his voice still a little bit trembling. Oh, darling, don't call me like that. Maybe I'm out of my age, but not that much, she joked. It's Miss Rosie, she corrected him kindly. Okay. Thank you, Miss Rosie, he answered, correcting his mistake. Don't mention it, darling. I just did what had to be done, she replied fondly. This was followed by a short silence, but it was cut right away by Izuku. So, are you one of my daddy's friends too? Izuku inquired from Rosie as he went on licking his ice cream, which was almost eaten fully at this point. Yes, indeed. We're like birds of a feather flock together. To be precise, I was the one who showed him around this place, she revealed, surprising Izuku with this fact. Really? Izuku questioned. Yes, darling. And what days those were. You should have seen him back then. Rosie replied. I can still call back how confused he was. He lacked some proper manners when I first met him, but I gave him a little guidance and assisted him to get used to those new conditions he faced, and in the end, we became very close friends, she explained with a sweet smile on her face. And, is my daddy nice to you? He inquired, nearly finishing the vanilla ice cream in his hands. Certainly. In fact, he even helps me and the inhabitants of the colony sometimes, she answered. So, he's kind of a hero? Izuku wondered shakily. Well, not quite, but yes, he indeed helps and protects the ones who he deems worthy, Rosie clarified, knowing that the longer Izuku doesn't know his father's unique heroic judgment, the better for him to sleep peacefully. Like me, Nifty interrupted, causing Izuku and Rosie to look at the one-eyed cockroach demon. Your father helped me too, and now I try to repay him with anything he wants, she explained, remembering how she made her own deal with Alastor decades ago. And, do you think I'm worthy of his protection? He questioned spiritlessly, observing the almost fully eaten ice cream in his hands. Why wouldn't you? You're his son, darling. Just this mere fact puts you as the number one on his list, Rosie pointed out, with Nifty nodding in agreement. So don't worry, darling. He'll always take care of you, she assured. This was kinda calming for our protagonist. Of course, his father already told him that he will always protect him, which ensured Izuku as well, but now he heard that his father was eager to help him and the ones who deserve it. He became more relieved. Now, he knew that it's 100% that his father is not the type of person who says something once and never keeps to it. He was really a kind person, and he will always be by his side, no matter what was the situation or what was the problem. As he thought over this, he failed to notice the rising of his ears and the small smile that morphed across his face, much to Shadow's, Nifty's, and Rosie's satisfaction. As this event occurred, a certain deer-based overlord wearing clean clothes approached them with causal, everyday steps, with his conversation done with the beetle-based sinner. When he reached them, he spoke up with his usual, cheerful tone, and with a broad, toothy smile formed on his face. Did I miss anything? Alastor asked with a wide grin, causing all four of them to set their eyes upon them. Daddy, he beamed as he accidentally dropped the ice cream cone with a little bit of ice cream in it, which Nifty cleaned up quickly and ran towards the radio demon for a hug, which Alastor happily accepted. Oh ho ho, take it easy, my boy, you almost pushed me down, Al noted jokingly while crouching and hugging his only child. Sorry, Izuku apologized. Don't be sorry, my boy, it's nothing, Alastor answered. Then they looked into each other's faces. Did you have fun with Rosie and Nifty? Yes, Daddy. And Miss Rosie told me how she and you met first, Izuku responded, making Alastor shoot his eyes wide in surprise by hearing this statement. Rosie, he called out with embarrassment. which was clearly not expected from the feared radio demon. "Oh, come on, Alastor, there's nothing to be ashamed of," Rosie replied, keeping her big smile. "Besides, I just wanted to cheer your little boy up." With this said out loud, Alastor let out a defeated sigh and looked back at one of his best friends. "You won't let suffer peacefully, will you, darling?" "No," she joked. Then both of them shared a chuckle-giggle as Izuku and Shadow turned their heads and exchanged their looks between Rosie and Alastor in confusion. Meanwhile, Nifty just observed the scene with a small smile. After they finished, Izuku looked back at his son and continued his conversation with him. "I suppose that was enough adventure for us today. Let's head back to our home, my boy," Alastor suggested. "Oh, okay," Izuku replied, now a bit more higher-spirited. After that, they broke their hug and Alastor stood up from his crouch and faced Rosie with his well-known grin. "Mind to join, my dear?" Alastor asked Rosie. "Of course, love," Rosie consented amiably. "And you, my dear Nifty?" he inquired from his female servant, turning down his head and looking at her with his red eyes. "I'm coming too," she declared with a lot of energy. "Then it's settled. Let us go back to my residence, shall we?" he announced, smiling in the process. And with this, our group set off towards the house of Alastor as the dark red orb with a huge pentagram on its surface became larger, and the night slowly approached them. The walk was not that long, just around 30 minutes. When they reached the house of the radio demon and got up on the 3 staircases, Alastor, who was at the front of the group with Izuku and Shadow next to him, fast walked to the door with them, grabbed the handle with his left hand, moved it downwards, and opened it for the 2 female demons of the group, allowing them to go inside first. "Ladies first, my dears," Alastor pronounced, opening the front door of his home wide. "Thank you, Alastor," Rosie remercied as she stepped inside and put her large hat on the handler of the coat stand, revealing her hair which was tied in a bun. "Thanks, Alastor," Nifty thanked as well, following Rosie in the process. After both of them entered, Alastor turned his head to the left and moved his head downwards, looking at his son and his shadowy friend. "Remember, my boy, always let a lady go ahead," he taught his boy. "Oh, okay, Daddy," Izuku nodded, understanding his father's lesson. "Now come, my boy, let's not make our pleasant guests wait," he suggested, then entered the house, while Izuku and Shadow followed him behind. Once all of them were inside, Alastor closed the door and with Izuku and Shadow, he headed to the dining room, where Rosie and Nifty were already waiting for them. And from then on, the rest of the day went pleasant. As a dinner, Alastor cooked his favorite meal for his son and his guests, which of course, was not other than the only dish that could even raise hell based on Alastor's opinion, jambalaya. When Izuku grabbed his fork, dug it into the meal, lifted it, moved towards his mouth, placed it inside his mouth, and tasted jambalaya for the first time in his life, it was so delicious that it immediately brought back his joyfulness and instantly became his second favorite dish, much to Alastor's delight. After their meal, they walked into the living room and Alastor grabbed a disc and placed it on the megaphone, and turned it on, allowing themselves to listen to some vintage and fashionable music, which Izuku and Shadow enjoyed as well. After the music began to play, Alastor offered his right hand to Rosie, who was sitting in one of the armchairs, inviting her for a dance. Rosie happily accepted his offer and took his hand, standing up from her seat and becoming the devils of the parquet with her old friend by dancing various dances like foxtrot, rumba, and samba, all the while the rest of the group observed this event unfold. As he watched his father dance with Miss Rosie, he got interested in their act and walked to the two overlords to ask his parent if he could educate him to dance like them. Alastor was so touched by this that he and Rosie showed him the ropes right away. Heck, Izuku even danced with both of them, with Rosie as first and Alastor as second, which was fully recorded by Nifty with her phone for the reason of preserving this memory for the future. This was the moment Izuku knew it was worth meeting his father. Although there were two major hiccups, it was far behind the so many good things he had experienced. He made a new friend, and found out he had another aunt besides Aunt Mitsuki. Heck, he even discovered new things about his quirk and learned some really basic dance moves. So overall, this was an absolutely great day for him and one of the best days of his life. This little dance practice went on for a while. Then Alastor and Rosie talked a little bit. Then Rosie decided to leave due to her remaining tasks at her colony, which Izuku was graceful for not knowing what kind of colony's leader was Rosie. After that, Alastor advised his little boy to take a bath, which he agreed to do kindly. Accompanied by Nifty and Shadow, Alastor took his little boy up to the first floor and guided him to the bathroom of his house, which was on the left side of the short hallway. There were 3 other doors in the hallway, 2 at the right side of the hallway and 1 at the left side of the hallway next to the door of the bathroom. There was also a single window at the end of the hallway. They walked to the door and Alastor opened it for his little boy and his shadowy companion, revealing the looks of the room. It was rather small than large, to be precise, but not too small. Its walls were covered with red tiles, while the tiles of the floor resembled checkerboard, but instead of black and white patterned tiles, they were light and dark red. It had a pedestal basin beneath a mirror and in front of a toilet, which had a footed vanity at its left side. The vanity possessed 2 doors at its front side, 3 red towels piled on each other at the top of it, and a single window above it. The last part of the bathroom was an empty roll-top bath at the end of the room, standing horizontally to the wall next to it, perfect for the purpose it was created for. As Alastor opened the door, Izuku, Shadow, and Nifty went to the bathtub and Nifty began to flow the water inside the bath, put some soap into it. Alastor snapped with his fingers, creating a vertically striped pajama top and bottom with dark and light green stripes and teleporting it next to the pile of towel on the vanity. After that, he closed the door, leaving the 3 of them alone in the room. As the water continued to pour into the bathtub, Izuku shyly asked Nifty and Shadow to close their eyes as long as he undresses. The cockroach demon and his shadowy friend did what they had been asked for, and they covered their eyes or shut their eyes. Izuku began to take off his clothes. After he took them off, he stepped up to the black step stool and carefully climbed into the bathtub almost full of water. When the sound of the splashing water was hearable, Nifty and Shadow opened their visionary organs, and as Izuku enjoyed the warm water and Shadow floated over his head, Nifty took out a tube of shampoo from the vanity, then walked to the bath, got up to the step stool, and asked Izuku to swim to her in order to help him wash his hair. Izuku complied with the request, moved to the side of the bath where his aunt was, and leaned to the side of the bathtub with his back, letting her gently wash and clean his hair and ears while the foam in the water surrounded Izuku like icebergs in the Arctic waters. When she was done and washed the foam away from her nephew's head, Shadow brought one of the towels to her, allowing her to dry Izuku's body after he got out of the water. Speaking of which, when Nifty kindly asked him to get out of the water, they were once again requested by our little broccoli head to close until he gets out of the water and turns around. After this was done and Izuku showed his back to them, Nifty fastly cleaned his body with the towel and helped him get into his pajamas. Then, after Nifty brushed his hair back to its previous form, she lifted the step stool and put it in front of the basin, allowing Izuku to wash his teeth if he wanted to. Izuku stepped up to the step stool and looked into the mirror with Shadow at his right side, searching for a toothbrush and toothpaste, which were magically placed on the basin. The toothbrush was green-colored and was placed inside a green glass while the toothpaste was next to the glass. Izuku grabbed the toothpaste, put in enough amount on the toothbrush, and began to clean his teeth. Meanwhile, Nifty folded up his clothes. Once he was fully done and put the toothbrush back into the glass, all 3 of them exited the room and saw Alastor next to the door in front of them, waiting for them. After they approached the radio demon, Alastor grabbed the door's handle and pushed it down, unlocking the door inwards in the process and offering him a chance to see how the room looked. The walls of the room had the same wallpaper the rest of the walls of the house possessed. At the right side of the room, a large wardrobe made out of dark red wood was placed with a bed next to it. It was standing horizontally to the wall at the right and had a dark red blanket and red pillow on it. On the left side of the room, the part that was closer to Izuku was occupied by a huge bookshelf with the shelves filled with different books, while there was a desk next to the bookshelf, which had 3 drawers at both of its sides, a vintage wooden chair in front of it, an old-fashioned table lamp with telescope arm on it, and another shelf above it. Finally, there was a window at the end of the room next to the desk, allowing Izuku to observe the streets of outer Pentagram City. After he looked around the room, Izuku rushed to the bed as Shadow flew after him and Alastor closed the door behind himself and followed his little boy to the side of the bed. As Izuku got up to the bed and lay on it, His father grabbed the blanket and covered his little boy's body with the blanket, leaving only his head, neck, and hands visible. Then, the radio demon looked at his son and opened his toothy mouth. "So, did you have fun today, my boy?" Alastor wondered with his iconic grin. "Yes, I had, Daddy," Izuku beamed cheerfully as he observed his father. "That's good to hear," Alastor said, then continued. "Now, rest well, my boy. I don't want you to stay away for long." Al finished as he stood up and was about to head out of the room, when his little boy prevented him from this act. "Will I see you again?" Izuku inquired as he observed his father with hopeful and a little bit worried eyes while shadow floated above Izuku's head and witnessed the whole scene. Hearing this, Alastor morphed his usual smile to a playful one and walked back to the side of the bed and kneeled down, focusing his full attention on Izuku. "Do not worry about this, my boy. I'll never be too far away. I assure you we will be in touch," Alastor assured. "And don't forget one thing, my boy," Alastor said, then moved his hands towards his mouth and placed his index fingers on the corners of his mouth, widening and showing off his smile a little bit. "You're never fully dressed without a smile," he advised. "Okay, Daddy," Izuku chuckled calmly. "And now, my boy, allow me to sing you a lullaby that I suppose will assist you in falling asleep. It's a little bit after my time, but it is such a thoughtful melody," Alastor requested as he cleared his throat and a sudden music started to play from seemingly nowhere, causing Izuku to look around in his bed confusedly. But this confusion vanished instantly when he heard his father sing "Turn On, We'll Meet Again" Alastor cover from Paranoid DJ if you want. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when. But I'll know we'll meet again. Some sunny day. Alastor sang as the gentle play of a piano in the background calmed Izuku down, causing him to yawn and stretch his arms for one last time, lay on his stomach, and place his hands under the pillow, while shadow began to turn back into Izuku's shadow and Alastor continued his singing. "Keep smiling through. Just like you always do. Till the blue skies drive clouds far away. And I will just say hello to the folks that you know. Tell them you won't belong. They'll be happy to know that as I saw you go, you were singing this song. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again. Some sunny day." Alastor chanted as he followed his performance with the mixture of a calming row of humming and the soft sound of the piano, making Izuku his eyelids become heavier and shadow almost fully go back to his shadow form. "We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again. Some sunny day." The radio demon finished, then looked at his son's shadow companion, who was nowhere to be seen. After that, he looked at his little boy, who was already sleeping the dream of the righteous. Alastor could help but put a sweet smile on his face as he observed his son rest peacefully and covered him with the blanket a little bit more. "Until we meet again, my dear sweet boy," he said as he caressed his son's hair, not noticing the peeking eye of Nifty on the other side of the room. With this, he stood up and went to the door. All the while Nifty went away from the door, not wanting to reveal her presence. When Alastor reached the door, opened it, exited the room, and was about to close the door, he took one last glance at the sleeping Izuku, then closed the door quietly, leaving Izuku to sleep in the room in silence. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author MaxX69 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.